Called to order. My name is Meg Bomke. I represent the Falmouth District and serve as the chairman of the Board of Supervisors. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Bomke.
Here.
Mr. Cavalier.
Here.
Mr. Cohen.
Here.
Mr. Dudenheffer.
Here.
Ms. Maurer.
Here.
Ms. Shelton.
Here.
Mr. Snellings.
Here.
Madam Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Mr. Snellings, will you please lead us into a closed meeting?
A resolution to authorize closed meeting, whereas the board desires to hold a closed meeting for discussion of the performance of a specific public employee of the Board of Supervisors, and whereas pursuant to Virginia Code 2.2-3711A1, such discussions may occur in closed meeting. So moved.
Second. Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, cast your vote. Tally the vote. The board is now in closed session. Thank you. Motion and a second. Any discussion? Cast your vote. Tally the vote. Motion passes unanimously. The board will now move into the ABC conference room on the second floor to receive a report on the recently completed fiscal year 2018 audit. This will be presented to the public in open session at the 3:00 p.m. meeting. Following the audit report, we will be in a work session on the county's 5-year financial plan. The board will reconvene in the board chambers at 3:00. Thank you. Board of Supervisors, and I represent the Falmouth District. The second annual Christmas in Stofford takes place this Saturday, December 15th, from noon to 7 p.m. at the Jeff Rouse Swim and Sports Center. All events are free, and there will be photos with Santa, a Christmas marketplace, the Frosty 5K and reindeer run, the Stofford Christmas Parade, and more. Please check out the county's website for future details. It's going to be a great day. The Department of Social Services has a few individuals still needing assistance for the holidays. If you are interested in helping out, please contact Aaron Riley at 540-658-8721. As we get to the end of the year, I'd like to thank all the volunteers that served in 2018 on the boards, authorities, committees, and commissions. Your service is invaluable to the residents and staff, and we hope you will continue to volunteer in 2019 and for years to come. One special group I'd like to recognize is the students involved in our YES program. That stands for Youth Engaged in Stofford. These high school students serve on the county's boards, authorities, committees, and commissions, and learn about county government and gain practical experience in the daily processes and decisions that make Stofford County a great place. This year, 13 students participated in the YES program, shared a student's perspective on issues and decisions. We thank them for their dedication and their willingness to serve. Okay. May I have a motion and a second to approve the regular agenda? We do have one addition, which is the proposed proclamation P18-25, recognizing our 41st President, George H.W. Bush.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and I have a second. Any discussion? Cast your vote. Tally the vote. Motion passes unanimously. And now I'm going to ask Mr. Cohen if he would please read the proclamation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate this. A proclamation honoring and recognizing President George Herbert Walker Bush for his dedication and service to America. Whereas George Herbert Walker Bush served our country as the 41st President of the United States, and whereas President Bush passed away on November 30th, 2018, at the age of 94. And whereas President Bush was a humble man of action and conviction, living an exemplary life of service to others, and whereas he volunteered for combat duty the day he turned 18 and became the Navy's youngest aviator during World War II, winning the Distinguished Flying Cross, 3 Air Medals, and the President Unit Citation awarded for the San Jacinto, on which he was a member of the crew, and whereas he served our country as a member of Congress, then as ambassador to the United Nations, chief of the United States Liaison Office in China, director of the Central Intelligence Agency, vice president, and finally president of the United States, and whereas his ability to work in a bipartisan manner fueled his success in all offices in which he served, and whereas his statesmanship and patient guidance helped bring our country through the end of the Cold War and brought years of prosperity to this country, and whereas he is remembered for as a strong and compassionate leader, husband and father, whose love of his family was very evident in the way he lived his life. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Stafford County Board of Supervisors on this 11th day of December, 2018, that it be and hereby does recognize and honor President George Herbert Walker Bush for his selfless service to our country.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen.
Thank you.
Now we will have presentations by the public. Please remain courteous and respectful to members of the audience and to the board. If you're here to speak about this evening's public hearing, please hold those comments until the 7 p.m. session. Each speaker is allowed 3 minutes. Please speak slowly and clearly into the microphone and begin by stating your name and address. Please refer to the light on the podium to monitor your time. Green indicates the start of your remarks. Yellow means you have 1 minute to summarize your comment, and red obviously means your time is up. I do have one speaker card. Mr. Gregory Gavin.
Gregory D. Gavin, 242 Stony Hill Road in Hartwood. Dear members, I present to you an opportunity to apply for a Virginia DGIF grant for $250,000 to $500,000 to improve access to the Rappahannock River at Lake Mooney. First, I'd like to start with the Stafford County Parks and Recreation memo. Next slide, please.
Computer, please.
Dated May 8th, 2018, from Mr. Michael Morris, our Parks Director. For brevity and focus, I have paraphrased it. At the April 17th Board of Supervisors meeting, a citizen inquired about the feasibility of having recreational access for kayak and canoe launching on the Rappahannock River and the general area of Lake Mooney. The following information is a summary of the past exploration on the matter and a very rough estimates on what costs might be to accommodate the request. The Virginia Outdoor Plan by the Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, next slide please, identifies public access to state waterways for non-motorized boating as one of the top recreational activities desired by residents in the George Washington Planning Region. The 2016 Stafford County Comprehensive Plan identifies the potential of non-motorized boating access to the Rappahannock River on the property owned by Stafford County. There are 2 possible locations near Lake Mooney for non-motorized boating access. Next slide, please. One is near the dam spillway for Lake Mooney on land owned and controlled by Stafford County adjacent to the AT&T utility easement. The second is more challenging, so I'd like to focus on the area below the dam spillway. The Public Utilities Department had conceptual drawings done in 2012 for potential non-motorized boating access to the Rappahannock River near the dam spillway at Lake Mooney, with vehicular access going by the water treatment plant. The option near the water treatment spillway was developed by the Public Utilities Department as a potential option for mitigation in the original environmental mitigation plan for the creation of Lake Mooney. Thus, the option has created the least environmental impacts and is the most feasible option considering the challenges. Preliminary rough estimates associated with creating vehicular access from Lake Mooney Park to the southern option near the dam spillway totaled approximately $400,000 to $400,000 based on the 2012 concept. Further final design work would be needed to involved in order to reach a final construction of the estimates. Should one of these options be chosen to provide recreational non-motorized boating access to the Rappahannock River, it would be included in the future CIP request. The opportunity, next slide please. The opportunity to apply for grants to help with the cost of this project is possible through the Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation. Next slide please. These grant funds are from the Federal Land and Water Conservation Fund. Grant awards from this fund are between $250,000 and $500,000 and require a 50% match. I found an opportunity for a grant with the Virginia VDGIF. I present my application to you now and will speak publicly in more detail at our January meeting. I ask for your assistance and support.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the board?
Paul Waldowski, 8 Picket Lane. Please do not come to my residence. I brought my friends. This is Daryl, and this is his other brother, Daryl. I'd like to wish my baby sister happy birthday on her 50th birthday, whereas hopefully she'll have many more once I get 4-minute speeches. I love how you recognize all the commissions, but we're the only county with utility commissioners, and I don't have time to go through the loss of revenue this year, but they keep on using up all our resources, just like move that church. You know, the one that meets now at the $65 million high school. As you know, this year we have the commercial corridor on 610, we have that new car wash coming. That's 1.5 miles away. In between that and Gary's Car Wash, we have Gibbons Wall. For those of you who don't know what Gibbons Wall is, it's just outside Park Ridge. Up there sits a house that needs to be demolished, but who knows? And of course, we have the Pence fence. That's the most beautiful thing that we have on 610. I got to finally use the U-turn this week. I went to Sherwin-Williams because in my kitchen I'm building a wall without congressional approval. So if you ever want to learn how to build a 2x6 wall, just contact me. Speaking of the Berlin Wall, George Herbert Walker Bush was my last true commander-in-chief. Even though I left active duty, it'll be 25 years next February 1st. I don't consider Hillary as a commander-in-chief. Oh, her husband wasn't having sex with that woman. I'm really sorry. And as far as selected chairmen go, I don't think you'll be chairman next year, but I'm hoping through redistricting, we have that new sign up, Falmouth and Stofford. Let's make it the town of Falmouth and you can become mayor. I also saw the sign Aquia in Stofford. I think Aquia also needs to become the town of Aquia. I haven't done no history lessons on that. Enon Road has all the potholes fixed, whereas thanks to me. And of course, Walpole is in my district and there's a school there. But 2 of you live very close to it. I think you should drive down it and report it to VDOT, the very dumb on transportation organization.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the board? With that, I'm going to close the public comment period and bring it back to the board.
Mr. Dudenheffer.
I pass.
Mrs. Maurer.
Okay, very quickly, Sweeto Burrito has opened out in the Rock Hill District. I was able to go to their soft opening on December 1st. Fantastic. Very excited to have them join the Rock Hill family, and I encourage everyone to go out there. It's new to Stafford County and extremely good. The nicest part about going to the Sweeto Burrito soft grand opening was all of the different new business owners that we have in that general vicinity. So the new coffee shop owner and Pie's Place and then the brewery folks, they were all there to wish a warm welcome to the Sweeto Burrito opening. And it's really nice to see the small businesses out in the Rock Hill District really supporting each other. And also I want to thank all the staff for a wonderful holiday gathering. It was a wonderful tribute to all of the volunteers, and I want to thank all of those that serve, that I have appointed to the boards and commissions for their service over the last year. I don't know if you realize how much I truly depend upon your advice and counsel, and I am grateful that you have chosen to serve in this volunteer capacity in 2018, or actually throughout the term of my service here on the board. So I want to thank you again and thank staff, and looking forward to a wonderful 2019. One final item, Madam Chair, I want to pull item number 3, which is finance and budget appropriate funding for the Fredericksburg Christian School renovations.
Okay.
Ms. Shelton.
Good evening. There's a couple things I'd like to talk about. Number one, our apologies to individuals that may have been inconvenienced through some of our changes that we've made at our recycle facilities in the interest of cutting down our, the way that we're losing money. If you didn't know that, we're losing a lot of money related to recycling. And we want you to know that, number one, we are continuing to have recycling, but our apologies are that we kind of messed that up a little bit on our communications, and we'll do better. Please recycle, continue on. The next thing I want to talk about is at PRTC, the Potomac, sorry about that, Potomac Rappahannock Transportation Commission. They wanted you guys to know that we have a really big problem coming up this summer. We'll be shutting down all the metro stations south of Reagan National Airport. That's why we're starting to talk about it now and do all those workarounds. And you might start thinking about that, but you'll see a lot of communications coming out from PRTC until then. And the last thing I wanted to do was really compliment some of my constituents that are out at Marlboro Point. We've been effectively able to move the power that they have going to Marlboro Point from Thorny Point straight over to Marlboro Point and give them some redundancy for their power problems. Now we're all looking forward to seeing if that actually helps. Thank you very much.
Mr. Snellings.
I'll defer.
Mr. Cavalier.
Yes, I had the opportunity to go to Whitewater Elementary School a couple weeks ago with Delegate Foy on the Take Your Legislator to School Day. And so we got a good tour with Dr. Kinzer, and a couple school board members were also in attendance. So very nice day, and everybody seemed to learn from the children that day. Thank you.
Mr. Cohen.
Thank you, Ms. Giles. I stand ready for any time they want to have someone take a legislator to school day. First, I'd like to thank staff and the members of the boards and commissions for their service for the past year. They do a great job, all in the ball, and it's just really impressive to see you in action. Several things I did. I met with the people from Empower House. We had a dinner, Miss Shelton, Miss Bomke, and I think we're at that early in the year. And so now that things have sort of settled down in life, I went back and met with them and had more of a talk with them and got to see what this great program does that meets a need for people in our community and is just doing a great service for our people. And I think people should look into seeing how they can donate to it. I attended with Ms. Shelton. We attended the promotion ceremony for the fire personnel. This was a terrific family event, and it just showed really how wonderful the people who are serving our community are and how our new chief is helping them meet their potential and rise up in their fields. Staff arranged a ceremony at our memorial here, which is sort of the whole point of having our memorial here, in memory of President Bush 41, and Mr. Snellings and I went to that, and it was really great that we have an environment where staff on their own came up with the idea that they wanted to do something to honor such a great man, and they felt that they could go forward. So I commend Mr. Foley for an environment where staff could go out and do something and then be supported in that. Last night I rang the bell for the Salvation Army, which is usually a yearly thing for me to do. What made it more special last night was that I had been asked by Robert Bellman if I would join the ringing of the bell in honor of his father, Ferris Bellman, and his brother, Roger. And Ferris had rung the bell for the Salvation Army with his friends for many, many years, so it just added a nice little poignancy to something that is a normal action for us. My mother and I had rung the bell for the Salvation Army in Florida for many years. It's a little bit different ringing it up here when it's 30-some degrees out. And then lastly, I just want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, a Happy Holidays, and a very good 2019. 2018 has been rough for many families, and so I'm hoping that people will have a healthy and happy 2019. Thank you.
Ms. Baumke.
Yes, I just wanted to say I'm very sorry that I was not able to attend the board and commission gathering that we had at Belmont. I was there in spirit, but I was very ill. I want to thank everybody who has worked very hard in all of those capacities for the entire year. We couldn't do it without you, and I hope you will step up and want to be on a committee or a commission again. I want to thank Marcia and Cheryl and Shannon Howe for their efforts in making that a really successful event. And I want to thank Mr. Snellings for filling in as the vice chair, even though he didn't follow all of my comments. So anyway, I also would like to bring to the board's attention, we have our first, since I've been on the board, our board annual report that has been produced by Mr. Dayton, who is responsible for the R board. I am not going to go through it in detail right now. However, even though Ms. Shelton and I are the appointees for the R board, I feel the responsibility of the financials of that organization are really that of the entire board. So I would like to request whoever the chairman is for January or February of next year that we actually ask Mr. Dayton to come back and give the board a full briefing on the R board. I think that's very important. Also, I would like to mention that last night we had a 2.5-hour FAMPO meeting, and as the chairman of GWRC, which is the George Washington Regional Commission, we are going to be looking at possibly modifying our memorandum of agreement that we have with FAMPO. So tomorrow night, I will be meeting with Tim McLaughlin, the chairman of FAMPO, along with 2 county administrators and a city manager, and along with the FAMPO administrator, Paul Agnello, and Linda Millsaps, who's the executive director. So I'll be bringing more information back to you on that. Mr. Dudenheffer and Ms. Shelton are also very active in that conversation. And lastly, I just want to thank you, my colleagues, for having faith in me and my ability to be your chairman this year. I have tried very hard to set all the personalities aside and really just focus on what's important here to Stafford County and making sure that we are moving our county forward as best to our ability with our leadership of Mr. Tom Foley. So I think it's been a great year, and I just want to thank you for that opportunity. And with that, I would like to know if Ms. McClendon has a report to the board.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have no report at this time.
Thank you. And Mr. Foley.
Madam Chair, we just have the presentation of the FY 2018 audit.
Okay.
Madam Chair, members of the board, good afternoon. Randy Helwig, Finance Controller. It's my pleasure to introduce Krista Edoff of Cherry Beckert, our audit firm. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, ladies and gentlemen of the board, and all others in attendance this afternoon. I am pleased to be here this afternoon to present the results of the June 30, 2018 audit. This will be a condensed version of what you saw in the 1 o'clock work session. So we were engaged to audit the financial statements of the county. We were engaged to perform a number of additional services, which I will kind of, since I briefed you on earlier, I'm not going to go through the spectrum of those again. As a result of our audit, I do want to focus specifically on the county. As you know, the county's audit does include the financial information of the school board, as such with all localities in Virginia. And so our opinion, even though it's specific to the county, it does include the school's information. So Based on our audit, we do expect to wrap the information up in totality and issue next week. We currently plan to have an unmodified opinion on our report. That is a clean report. As part of our audited financial statement, our report does alert you to the fact that the county issued a significant new accounting standard this year, that is GASB 75, and that essentially brings the OPEB liabilities onto the face of the financial statements. So if you try to compare this year's financial statements to last year's financial statements, because of that significant change, you will not be comparing apples to apples. So that's why we encourage you to read the relevant footnote as it relates to this new standard and the overall significant impact of it. So with our audit, an audit is not just an audit of the financial statements. It's also over compliance with laws and regulations, especially those specific to the Auditor of Public Accounts of the Commonwealth of Virginia, as well as a compliance with your federal grants. And so in addition to just issuing our opinion on the financial statements, we do issue those two other reports, one specific to laws and regulations, especially those in Virginia, and then the one specific to the federal grants. So on our report of compliance for government auditing standards and the Auditor of Public Accounts, again, we anticipate having an unmodified opinion that is a clean opinion. So in conducting our testing, if any matters of internal control in financial reporting were to come to our attention, or any matters of non-compliance with those state laws and regulations were to occur, we would be required to report those to you. So I am pleased to tell you we did not have any matters of non-compliance in our testing of your overall laws and regulations or those specific to the Auditor of Public Accounts. Additionally, we did not identify any materials weaknesses in internal controls over financial reporting. However, we did issue one comment related to construction and process and a separate letter to management just over improvements that they could make really in the recording and reconciliation of those projects that they have in process. So on our opinion with the uniform grant guidance, this would be your compliance with the federal grants, we do have an unmodified opinion except as it relates to the components of eligibility specific to the Medicaid and TANF program. And essentially what that means was based on our testing, there was material non-compliance in the performance related to the eligibility and the timely redeterminations for participants receiving those Medicaid and TANF benefits. So not to discount the impact of this finding, however, this is a statewide issue, not something just specific to Stofford County, acknowledging that because of recent impact with the Affordable Care Act and with Medicaid expansion, there's just a significant amount of caseloads required of the staffing that just cannot be consumed in a timely manner. So we did have a modification to our opinion specifically related to the eligibility of Medicaid and TANF. Also in our testing, we did identify one additional matter of non-compliance. Again, it was not of a material nature, where again, we recommended to management specifically that they make some changes in the way they process and approve reimbursement requests for the SAFER program. So we did identify non-compliance with that program. So as part of additional requirements, although there was a clean audit, we did propose several journal entries that management did make in order to make the financial statements be correctly misstated. So we did walk through those in detail. The first one really is a no impact. It just impacts one financial statement, so essentially a revenue and an offsetting expense. And so again, there was no net impact of that, but we did have management make that just to gross up and classify things correctly for financial statement presentation. The second entry really relates to the recording of the OPEB liability. And really in that whole process, we worked with management to assist them in recording such a substantial liability onto the face of the books and all the various components that were required from the multiple plans that are participated in. And then the last one, again, relates specifically to construction and process, where projects that were completed weren't closed out and depreciated in a timely manner. So there was a lag in when depreciation expense was correctly recorded. So we did propose that journal entry and ultimately proposed, again, a management letter process improvement for management to essentially make changes to that process so this doesn't happen going forward. So that ultimately concludes our audit presentation. Again, these are preliminary results. We're in the very final stages of wrapping this up and expect to issue next week. So with that, I'm very pleased. I just want to thank the finance departments and management and the other departments that really assisted, including schools, with the overwhelming amount of information that's required to be provided for the audit and in preparing the financial statement. So I would like to issue our sincere thanks to those that did assist during the audit. And with that, I'll take any questions you might have.
Are there any questions? No, we thank you for the audit work that you've done, and we appreciate the very thorough report that you gave us upstairs and the synopsis down here. Thank you very much for your efforts.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. We're going to move on. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda minus item number 3?
So moved.
Okay, I have a motion and I have a second. Any discussion? Okay, cast your vote. Tally the vote. Motion passes unanimously. Mrs. Maurer, number 3.
Okay, I have a couple of questions on this, and I don't know if the questions, who I address these questions to. We have a new purchasing person.
Madam Chair, Andrea Light, Budget Division Director.
All right, Andrea, I really appreciate the new approach that we're taking to budgeting and appropriating. You have incorporated the board's intentions in this resolution. I do have one question. However, have we received the contracts back? Do we know what the projected contract amount is going to be?
Not to my knowledge. That is definitely a question for the purchasing manager. Okay. And at the time, I don't know when the bids will be open. I believe that is this week.
Okay.
So it should be soon.
Here's my concern. If the bids come in, and they come in, let's say theoretically at 2.2 million, there's this 400,000 that we're sending over there that may not necessarily be needed for Fredericksburg Christian School. And previously, that's been getting reappropriated onto other projects that were not on our radar screen, I guess is the best way to put it. Is it possible for us to budget and appropriate, and this is a language, Ms. Rashida, the amount of the school board approved contract not to exceed the $2.658 million? Is it possible to change the resolution and amend it to say such?
Supervisor Maurer, I believe it is possible. I would note, and I would ask the budget director whether or not we need to build in a contingency there so it's above the contract price.
So the contingency of 10%, we're withholding 50% of the contingency amount, so they have incorporated that into the resolution, which I do appreciate, unless and until they actually need those funds. But absent actual contracts, and we saw this with the Hartwood septic system, is that we budgeted and appropriated a certain amount. They didn't need it all but 400,000, and then that got shifted over into kind of a food fight. So I would like to budget and appropriate the contract amount not to exceed.
Yes, Mr. Snellings?
I agree with Ms. Maurer on this, but I'd like to take it a step further. Can we hold off on appropriating anything until we have the bids back and they've accepted the bid? Can we do that?
I think the timing of that is going to be very difficult for the school board to start the project in order to get it done in time. That's my supposition, but looking at the timing of our meetings.
Yeah, because we'd be doing a second meeting in January, you're correct. Okay.
Yeah.
And Ms. Maurer, this does not budget and appropriate the furniture, fixture, and equipment of approximately $400,000. So there's still that to be done later in the year. If the board so chooses, they may decide that if the contract price comes in under this amount, to withhold some of that appropriation then on furnitures, fixtures, and equipment.
The appropriation by phases also creates an opportunity for you to check on that each step along the way.
You guys have done yeoman's work, and we're changing the way we're budgeting and appropriating. So I do appreciate that. This is a significant change to what we've done before. Given the $400,000, I will approve this agenda item, but I'm going to be very clear that next year, if the contracts come in lower, that they can expect that, at least my position will be to deduct that delta from furnitures, fixtures, and equipment.
And we can look into this procedure going forward as to whether just the contract not to exceed may be a way to do that as a normal practice. Yeah. We'll look into the pros and cons of that.
My intention is not to hold up Fredericksburg Christian School, but I do want to make sure what we're budgeting and appropriating is actually what they're spending it on.
Certainly.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you, Ms. Light.
With that, Madam Chair, since this is in my district, I will make a motion to approve the resolution.
Okay, that's R18-302. Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Cast your vote. Tally the vote. Yay, Fredericksburg Christian School. Boy, we've worked on that all year, haven't we? And last year. Okay, we have 2 items of unfinished business. The first is the water and sewer extension fees. We heard that as new business at our last meeting. Mr. Towery.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the board. I did put together a brief presentation just to try to recap this, as we've talked about this a number of times. Just thought it'd be helpful. There we go. Okay. In October of 2017, the board requested revisions to be considered to the water and sewer extension policy and instructed the Utilities Commission and staff to take a closer look at that. We spent a better part of a year going through that, and then in October of this year came back to the Infrastructure Committee with some recommendations. And then as Ms. Baumke mentioned, this was brought before the board as a new business item in November, the past meeting. At the request of the board, the extension policy was primarily evaluated to consider two primary issues: whether or not the policy placed unreasonable costs on the utilities fund and what might be done to mitigate that, and what could be done to bind property owners who would be served by the extensions to payments in order to avoid extensions without connections being actually made. The current policy was broken into 4 categories: a CIP level, a short extension project level, a neighborhood extension project level, and a large-scale project level. Historically, the utilities fund experienced significant losses between $18,000 to $19,000 per lot, and that again is what we would say a cost per lot. So that's really a measurement of the cost it takes for us to actually extend water and make it available at lots. That does not take into account whether or not those lots actually hook up. That's just to say we extended water and made it available to, say, 100 lots with a certain project. So a cost per lot of about $18,000 to $19,000. Those costs don't include the expansion costs that we incur down at the water and wastewater treatment facilities. Those are just construction costs to extend the infrastructure into those neighborhoods. And this is really the primary concern that staff is seeking to address through this revision. Final participation rate on many of these projects has been pretty slim. At times we've had 20 to 30% served, so the actual cost per lot served, if you will, or based on actual hookups, could be much more significant, up to $40,000 to $60,000 per lot. In order to address these liabilities, staff has made a couple recommendations with the policy. In particular, we are suggesting that the policy be revised to limit essentially the scope of what could be covered under an extension policy. We're looking to simplify it, to eliminate the 4 categories and just come down to one simple extension project category, and to really just focus those in on situations where you would have well or septic failures, potential or identified or likely. Additionally, the current policy allows for significant administrative approval where I, as the director, could authorize up to, in this case, $250,000 right now in a short extension project, and we felt that that was too much, so we're recommending that that be limited to administrative approval of $50,000, and then up to $100,000 with the Utility Commission's approval and oversight. Of course, anything above $100,000 would require board oversight and approval. Additionally,
Ms. Maurer?
So between the old policy and the new policy, we have taken out all reference to a service district. And that gives me a little bit of pause. I would like that language to be included because I would like anything going over 100,000 for the people to understand that it could result in a service district. Can we add language that says, and may result in a service district?
Absolutely. We were able to do that. And there was a question that we were discussing at the last board meeting about whether that threshold would be 100,000 or 250,000. And so we did bring back 2 alternatives, if you will, and so depending which way the board goes, we can adjust that language to reflect that.
And I'm okay with 100,000 as long as we put and may result in a service district. That's the only amendment I would like to see, because what I don't want people to do is go through the whole process and say, well, what is a service district?
Okay.
And may, not will.
Okay.
Good. Okay.
Additionally, we're recommending imposing an extension fee, and in this case, the recommendation based on the research we've conducted, both historical and based on current pricing that we're seeing, would be to set this initially at $15,000 per lot for either water or sewer. So that would be, again, to help recoup the cost that it takes to actually extend that water or sewer to those lots. In order to minimize costs and limit liability, the policy provides for performing the design and construction of extensions in-house to the greatest extent practicable. Extensions would be subject to the ability of the department to accommodate the project at the time of the request, both in funding and in personnel. In projects which might exceed the ability of the department to design or construct would be referred to a contractor to be addressed through the normal development process. So those would be projects we would not be able to carry forward with. The policy does recommend a 51% majority to petition the department for the project, and the department would carry those costs initially through CIP funds, and then, of course, look to recoup those over time as more hookups became likely down the road. We are also proposing that the extension fee could be financed at a 0% rate for 5 years, so that it's not an initial hit to the pocketbook, if you will. And of course, this does not apply to new construction. This is really intended to address water and sewer extensions for well or septic failures within the urban service area. So in summary, couple quick slides here. The original recommendation by the Utility Commission provided for the extension projects to be limited to $500,000 in total cost. The Infrastructure Committee recommended a limit of $100,000 for the policy, so that anything beyond $100,000 would be considered really to go into a service district. At the November 27th meeting, staff recommended that the board might want to consider a limit of $250,000 as that triggering threshold to be included in the policy or to automatically be referred to some type of service district. 2 options are, as was requested, we put together 2 options for the board to consider for future consideration. Our 18296 provides revisions to the policy to limit the total cost of projects covered under the policy to $100,000, and our 18297 does the same but limits it to $250,000. So that was one decision point for the board to consider. And under either resolution, the addition of the extension fee, or the imposition rather of the extension fee, is contemplated, which would require a public hearing. So R-18-309, which is before the board for consideration today, would be to authorize that public hearing to occur. Be happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Towery? Mr. Snellings?
What is our current hookup fee?
We have a connection fee right now that's about $1,500 per lot, and that assumes that there is water or sewer existing at the point of connection.
Explain to me where the 15,000 comes in.
Right now, those fees are not recouped by the utilities department. So if a neighborhood desires to have water or sewer extended, the utilities fund incurs the total cost of that extension. Folks would pay to hook up to that line and then pay an availability fee for expansions to be made at the water and sewer plant, but the actual cost of the utilities department to construct the line along the street to be made available to all those houses is currently a loss to the fund. And so the $15,000 per lot is an effort to recoup those losses so that we're not.
So maybe I'm getting ahead of this because we've got to have a public hearing, but just while the question's on my mind. So if you run water down my street and I don't want to hook up to it, what happens? Do I still pay the $15,000?
No. Right now, the way the policy is structured is to allow for, in the case of a neighborhood extension project, if 51% of the neighbors were to petition, then we would extend it down there. Now, if you chose not to hook up at the time, but 5 years down or 10 years down the road wanted to hook up, then you would pay the extension fee at that time.
Okay.
And the extension fee would be the $15,000 per lot owner.
Correct.
Now, it could be a different fee later
down the road,
if that fee has increased or decreased.
Correct. And so there would be an incentive to hook up earlier than later because the fees could eventually change.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any questions? Ms. Maurer?
Okay, so I'm actually reading the language in the policy, and I don't see where it says over $100,000 it requires Board of Supervisor approval. Actually, the language says projects with an estimated cost greater than $100,000 shall not be allowed under the policy, meaning it stops and we're done.
So there's two proposals, or I'm sorry, two options that the board could consider. The one that you're seeing there is R-18-296. That was the one that the board requested would be limited, where the policy would limit to $100,000.
Okay.
So under that one,
the other one has $100,000 but less than $250 requires approval of the Board of Supervisors. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I see this. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
But then we also have R-18-309, which is advertising the extension fee.
That's correct. So we're not actually asking for action today on the other two. Those are, again, the board could direct staff, if you would like, to, if you will, pick one or the other for purposes of advertising, although we're really advertising an extension fee, which is going to be $15,000 either way.
Okay. What is the pleasure of the board on this? Do we have other questions for Mr. Towery?
No, but Madam
Okay.
Chair, I'm prepared to make a motion, and we're sending this to public hearing, correct?
This would authorize.
We're authorizing.
Correct.
Okay.
And by doing so, we would also take this to the Utilities Commission, do their public hearing. So you would likely see this back in February time, maybe March timeframe, depending on the timing of the public hearing.
Okay. Madam Chair, I would make a motion for Resolution R-18-297, which requires Board of Supervisor approval for projects above $100,000, and I would like that language amended to state and may require a service district.
Just one point of, go ahead.
Madam Chairman and Supervisor Maurer, actually what we're asking the board to authorize is R-18-309 to advertise the public hearing.
Okay.
We can take that change that you've requested and incorporate into the policy and bring that back to the board's consideration at the public hearing.
Okay, wonderful. Then I will change my resolution then to R-18-309.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on R18-309? Seeing none, cast your vote. Tally the vote. Motion passes unanimously. So that's it.
That's it.
Yep, okay. Okay. Next, we have Mr. Dayton is going to present an update on the comprehensive road evaluation. Item number 15, Mr. Dayton.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the board. I'm project manager for the comprehensive road evaluation. Provide an update. After the last board meeting, staff was directed to continue on with the analysis of 63 road segments. This included 38 with traffic counts above 1,700 vehicles per day and 25 road segments below 1,700 vehicles per day. The recommended road list, I won't go over it, but over 1,700, these are the 38 that were included on that list at the last meeting, and the 25 roads under 1,700 vehicles per day are on the next slide. So these are the roads that were subjected to a more detailed analysis. That analysis included first a reset of the injury rate statistics. It turned out that the secondary road injury rates, the threshold was so high that very few roads were receiving 500 points. That was felt to not be useful for the study. So instead of 3 times the statewide rate, we dropped that to 2 times the statewide rate, and that was true for both the primary and the secondary. But far and away, most of the roads on this list are secondary roads, so we picked up a few more 500 scores. Then we added evaluation criteria to account for the variation in density of accidents. The accident rate that we were using resulted in a number of very low traffic count roads receiving high injury rates. Just takes one accident and the rate goes way up, crash rate. So we added an additional criteria to try to sort of blend that in a little better. Also added a scoring category for operational performance. There wasn't one in there previously. New scoring was added to the previous scoring. None of the earlier information was dropped. We just added the additional scores, the numbers, to get new totals. And then staff reviewed accident descriptions and the mapping for every road and road segment. And that allowed us to get a little better handle on the type of accidents that were occurring on various sections of road, be it congestion, intersection-related accidents, or geometry-related accidents. For the accident density, basically accidents per mile, we looked at the total number of accidents over that 3-year study period and the length of the road segment, simple math. And if we had over 20 accidents per mile, it received a score of 300, 200, then 100, and then down to 0 if it was less than 5 accidents per mile. I wanted to point out that our reportable accidents would have to have an injury, a fatality, or property damage over 1,500. Obviously, there's accidents out there that aren't reported. They're not in our database, so they're not pulled into that. But you may hear that from time to time. I know there's a lot more accidents out there. Well, that may be the case, but they may have been in the ditch, out of the ditch, no damage, so they didn't get reported into the database. So the operational rating was a little more complicated. We had to take a ratio of the road capacity in vehicles per hour and the road use in vehicles per hour. And to do that, we used a methodology that came out of our impact fee analysis that we completed a few years back. That impact fee analysis took into account many, many more road segments even than this study is doing. Looked at each one of these segments, looked at the number of lanes, lane width, shoulders, intersections, and driveways. I think speed limit was also included. So it took in a lot of factors to determine what the capacity, safe capacity of a particular road segment might be. Then we looked at our capacity per hour by using the data that VDOT had provided, either 2016, 2017, or targeted traffic counts that we went out and used. So that updated our 2010 vehicle count data to much more current information. And then we used that road capacity and the road volume to come up with a ratio. And if we had a lot of capacity left, it would get an A or a B rating on down to an F rating, which is failure of a particular road. This methodology differs a little bit from the standard intersection road rating, which is a time of delay, and converts it to a free flow road rating. Then we took the A and the B, received a score of 0. Basically, they're operating just fine. C and D, that's transitioning to a marginal rating, a score of 200. And then E and F are both failure ratings, and they received a score of 400. Looked at each road segment for the type of description of the accident, the location, and we looked at crash diagrams. I have a couple of examples. And we noticed that the accidents tend to be segregated in two basic categories, congestion and intersection related. You'd see the rear end, the side swipe in the same direction, and the angle crashes tend to be in areas that had conflict points, like intersections, and then road geometry, basically road width, lane width, and curvature, sight distance related accidents. And these would be the run off the road, side swipe in an opposite direction, and then the head-on crashes tend to be found on our roads with geometry related problems. So we summarize that and then ultimately use that to come up with a recommended road improvement later on in the study. Just a couple of examples. Segment of road on Mountain View Road, you can see where the accidents occurred, and you tend to see a preponderance in many cases of crashes at intersections. But on this particular stretch of road, rural in nature, heavily traveled, we also found about an equal distribution of the intersection and the a run off the road type or road geometry related crashes. So this is the kind of information that was available and utilized in the study. And then we also had crash diagrams. Beyond the simple diagram, we had reports from drivers that were involved and witnesses, and the officer would make notes as well. So this was all information that was useful to try to get at what kind of problems we're having on our roadways. Talk just a minute about cost estimates. We used our recent road building experience and also some VDOT experience in this particular area. We looked and we applied 5 different road improvement alternatives, the 4 to 6 lane widening, 2 to 4 lane widening, a 2 to 3 lane widening, which we haven't done much of, but might be useful going forward. Our two-lane reconstruction, which are a major overhaul of a two-lane road, but it still remains a two-lane road, and then a two-lane improvement to a 3R standard, and we're doing that out of Brook Road, lessens the overall cost significantly because it's able to use the existing alignment a little more, cuts right away in utility relocation costs. Obviously, $25 million is the most expensive per mile, down to $6.5 million. These are inflated out, assuming no road construction would occur to about 2025, so there's about a 30% factor in there. Now, for our lesser traveled roads, those at this point below 1,700 vehicle per day per lane, we used the number that VDOT had provided, looking at a 2-foot wide on each in each direction shoulder wedge improvement to try to give our drivers a little wider roadway, opportunity to install edge lines where right now none may exist, and give a little bit of a road a recovery area. If you do get off the road a little bit, you're not immediately in the ditch. And also it helps us, I believe, with the erosion that we see right at the edge of the pavement and the big drop-offs that tend to cause accidents as well. But if we're going to use a wedge improvement, then at this cost of $110,000 per mile, we would need to coordinate that program with the VDOT repaving schedule. If we don't coordinate it, then it requires a more robust wedge improvement, a little thicker pavement to hold up on its own a little better, and that doubles the cost of this particular technique. So shrinking the spreadsheet down to get rid of some of the previous information and look ahead. This is now what our road evaluation spreadsheet looks like. There are categories to the right that describe a recommended improvement and an estimated cost. And then on the column just inside the far right, it provides a running total. We went down the first 18 projects. There's 4 on the list, 2 that are recommended for a STARS, a safety study, to look at possible alternatives to a major reconstruction. And that's the section of Garrisonville Road between I-95 and Onville Road. That is already heavily developed around there and would be extraordinarily expensive to undertake a widening project in that area. And then a section of White Oak Road between the YMCA and out where it turns from 4 lanes to 2 lanes. They are high accident areas, and they certainly deserve to be looked at, but there may be alternatives other than a major road reconstruction project. 2 of the projects, Garrisonville Road, number 10, was recently completed, and no additional improvements are recommended at this time. And then Berea Church Road is now underway. So of the 18 on the list, there's 14 that have been costed out using that technique. I did want to point out number 18, Leland Road. A couple things happened there. We pulled those project limits back to coincide with the VDOT Highway Safety Improvement Program project. That shrinks the overall length of the project, and it turns out that most of the accidents in that stretch were here, although the original one went all the way to Morton Road. There were very few accidents on that safer, wider stretch of road. So we pulled that back. That ended up with some points being awarded, but also we put the cost in there. And we had some recent information that I've incorporated in this version that the $2 million we expected to be short is actually over $5 million. So that was a big change, and that is late breaking news, but I wanted to share that. Other than that, it's pretty much as you have in your package. Continuing on to the next page, these are also roads over 1,700 vehicle per day per lane. There's been no improvement identified on that. I believe this is an area that needs to be analyzed still further. I think there may be options to major road reconstruction. So pending some board input, we haven't spent the time to cost out improvements in that area. We'd actually be looking at recommendations for other approaches to keep the cost of those down. And then for roads under 1,700 vehicle per day per lane, we're using the VDOT formulation to come up with a cost for each segment and a running total on the far right. And then there are some examples in there that would not help. For instance, Litchfield Boulevard could not be improved by a wedge technique, so that wasn't costed out. There's a few others similar to that. Then it continues down into the second page and runs out to a total of about 6.6 million, a little over 6.6 million for this type of improvement. But once again, that would require coordination with the VDOT repaving program to hold those costs. As I mentioned, yes, Mr. Cavalier.
Question, your number is slightly different from the number that I'm looking at now. So you've updated this since?
That is correct. Yes, sir. There has been some update.
Not much on this one, thankfully, but
yeah,
$100,000 or less.
That is correct. Yes, there was some updated numbers that were put in as they became apparent in this version. So additional analysis, certainly input from the board, and any direction that the board wishes to provide. Then to further refine some major recommended road improvements. I think there's some options to go from perhaps a 2-lane reconstruction down to a 3R type improvement on some of our 2-lane roads that are have lesser traffic counts on the farther reaches. That could drop some costs down. Then to perhaps move some of our heavier traveled roadways over to shoulder wedge improvements and move them basically over to the other list. I think there's a number of examples that that could be applied rather than wait years and years perhaps for funding to do a major upgrade. There could be a move a little quicker on some of these wedge improvements, and would look at that and bring some recommendations back. Need to get the repaving list from VDOT. They've agreed to work on that, and I'm supposed to see that. And then that would begin to take that information and put it into this priority listing for the lesser traveled roads and see how those two would fit together. And then to do a windshield survey with VDOT. Quite honestly, some of these roads aren't going to set up well even for the 2-foot wide. It's 4 foot overall just because of the topography adjacent to the roadway. So there probably are areas that it simply won't work. The next steps today, this is the additional presentation of the additional analysis that we talked about at the November meeting. This puts us roughly 2 months ahead of the original schedule. This could allow us an opportunity to go out and seek some public input. We didn't have a lot of time previously, but I think it's possible to do that in January. You could come back then after this public input opportunity and consider a final priority list on February 5th, and then move right on to a discussion of funding strategies. So with that, that concludes my presentation, if there's any questions.
Great presentation, Mr. Dayton. Any questions for Mr. Dayton? Mr. Dudenheffer?
I was going to turn my mic off, but I will say, Keith, we keep adding to this. I think this is going to be a poster child type thing for many communities out there on how they approach their major secondary and secondary roads out there. So I'm excited about the progress we're making, and it's all on you. We keep pushing more and more on you, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate what you're doing. I hope that we can aggressively attack the under 1,700 list, much quicker than the older list. So, but again, thank you very much for your help, and don't plan on going anywhere.
Okay, any other questions or comments for Mr. Dayton? Okay, thank you very much. Okay.
Just as a follow-on for the public, the plan is to incorporate this into our CIP potentially?
Correct.
And budgeting, okay.
And if I remember correctly, we did have a discussion about taking this to the public and having a meeting in the north and in the south. So I'm sure. That was on the slide. Right. So that would happen in January.
Yeah, and that would allow us also to consider this during the budget process in March as well. So.
Okay. Okay, so with that, do I have a motion to approve this comprehensive evaluation? I don't think there's a motion. Are we approving it?
Yeah, Madam Chair, this is just an update on progress.
It's just an update, okay.
And we'll be continuing to come back with you.
Okay, all right, thank you. Sorry, my mistake. Okay, as a matter of new business, the board has asked to authorize the chairman to send a letter to VDOT regarding proposed speed limit increases on State Route 3 in the George Washington District and on US Route 17 in the Hartwood District. Let's see. Is Lynn Keenan here from VDOT?
Good afternoon, Ms. Chairman, members of the board. As you noted, Lynn is here. The General Assembly did recently pass two identical pieces of legislation, HB 73, the delegate was Mr. Thomas, and SB 466, Delegate Reeves. Those did raise the maximum speed limit on Route 3 and 17 from 55 miles per hour to 60 miles per hour. But also required that a study be done. So as you all are aware, Ms. Keenan, VDOT came and spoke to the board at the last Infrastructure Committee meeting and VDOT has requested that the board consider whether or not to issue a letter in support for the changes to the speed limit. So if you have any questions, Ms. Keenan is here, and we do have her presentation as well, which we can queue up if you have any further questions.
Okay.
Do you want the presentation again? It's up to you all if you do.
Yeah,
it's the same one.
Yeah, I don't think we need the presentation, but I appreciate your offer. Okay, does anybody have any questions for Ms. Keenan? Okay, Gary.
On your traffic studies,
yes,
I find that the Route 3 traffic, average annual daily traffic is 21,000 vehicles.
Correct.
Same amount on Route 17. I mean, that doesn't sound, that's a big coincidence if they both came out at 21,000.
So this is based on the study area that was provided. So on Route 3, it's 21,432.
Okay.
And on the section of 17, it's 20,652. So we just rounded to make that easier.
Okay.
So it's roughly 21,000 in both.
Thank you.
It's about the same. Okay. All right, any other questions?
Not for, I just have a question for staff, actually.
Okay.
Because I had asked, and I know I had asked I think it was Mr. Smith this, but I was curious if we had done any communications with the actual people who live on these two roads. Not people on ancillary roads, but the people who live on it. I've done some on my own, but I was just curious if we did a systematic one, which is what I asked.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Mr. Snelling.
The resolution is asking for us to support or oppose. But does it really matter what we say? Isn't this going to happen anyway? I mean, the General Assembly's passed it.
No, so the General Assembly passed legislation that a speed study was required and that those roads, as well as a number of others throughout the state, could be posted at 60.
So if we vote today to oppose the 60-mile-an-hour speed limit.
Correct. We would not post it at 60.
Okay.
We would leave it at 55.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great.
And there's also the opportunity, if you want to reduce the limits, we're happy to do that as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, now I do not see, is there a resolution in here?
No, it's not a resolution, it's just.
Yeah, we're just going to have to make a motion. There's actually no
Right,
resolution.
I was wondering, so we
So,
can, Ms. McClendon is making us.
This would be a letter, Madam Chairman, so really
Okay.
just looking for the will of the board as to whether you'd like to make a change.
Okay.
Okay.
So do I
So-
have a motion?
I would like to make a motion that we oppose this, and I'll make comments after.
I second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
So we want
Yep.
to send a letter opposing the raising
Yes.
of the speed limit?
Right.
Correct.
Okay,
Yes,
just
that's my
correct.
motion. And just-
clarification.
Right.
Opposing the letter or opposing
Well,
the speed
I'm
limit?
opposing the
Opposing the
raising of the
speed
speed
limit.
limits. The
Excuse
Madam
me.
Chair can send that letter, that would
Excuse
be
me,
wonderful.
Madam Chairman and Supervisor Cohen, this is actually a new business item,
Right.
so for the board to vote on it today, you would have to find it time sensitive
Oh, that's
first.
right.
Right, that's what I was
Okay.
wondering. Thank you.
All
Because
right.
Mr. Snellings and I were having a conversation beforehand, and it, yeah.
Okay, so we'll be bringing this back at the January meeting. Is that going to be?
Yeah,
is that
just
gonna
just
be
for
too late?
clarifications, oftentimes we allow the chairman to send a letter. It's not an official act, it's not official policy, we're kind of getting a will of the board a sense of the will of the board to send a letter. I'm not certain that would be in contrast to our bylaws. Ma'am?
Getting a sense or will of the board is not in contrast to the bylaws, but taking a motion on a new business item is.
Okay, so I will withdraw my motion.
And Madam
But-
Chair, if the board wants to make it clear what your direction is, a letter could be sent. I think you just don't need the motion, but if there's any,
Is there anybody that opposes moving forward in the manner that's been mentioned?
No, ma'am.
To translate, that would mean, is anyone in favor of raising the speed limit? And I'll say, I hope that the will of the board is that it's not. I don't, for the interest of time, I won't go through my whole plethora of reasons. But the residents that I talk to are very, very concerned about this going up.
Okay, all right, I think we have it.
All right.
Thank you, I appreciate you coming today.
Thank you.
We're going to send a letter.
It strongly says no.
Opposing, we're going to send a letter opposing the speed, well, I thought it was pretty clear. Oh, okay, clear as mud. Okay, all right. With that, moving right along to item number 17. Mr. Smith is here to talk about healthy growth, one of the board's strategic plan priorities. Mr. Smith.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, members of the board. My name is Mike Smith. I am the Deputy County Administrator. And as mentioned, I'm here to talk about healthy growth. As you know, the board recently approved a strategic plan, and it has several priorities on it, and each of those has a number of three-year priorities. Those 7 major categories are shown. I'm not going to go through each one of those. The board has tasked staff with developing work plans for each of these three-year priorities. The first plan that was developed, you just saw, was Mr. Dayton going through the comprehensive road analysis. That was under the responsive transportation system priority. The next proposed work plan will focus on the first of the three-year priorities under healthy growth, which is to identify and execute growth management strategies that align our comprehensive plan and infrastructure without negatively affecting taxation. And the 2 bullets underneath the board's strategic priority there was to incentivize growth in the targeted growth area and to evaluate zoning areas outside. In order to move this work plan forward, we suggest that we would do a comprehensive analysis of this issue. We would look at the data from our comparative localities. We'll look at any tools that are available to incentivize that growth inside the desired development area, the urban services area. We'll interview stakeholders, both builders and owners of large property lots, and we would analyze the cost to the county for the development within urban service area compared to outside of the urban services area. And we will work with the Commissioner of Revenue to do that analysis, as well as use some standards from other outside agencies. We would also then go and do some public outreach. We'd have roundtables. We'd do about 4 roundtables with 8 to 12 constituents, and then 1 large public meeting to give all of the data that we collected, both in our analysis and in these roundtables. The roundtables, like I said, will have about 8 to 12 attendees. We would rely on the Board of Supervisors as well as the Planning Commission to recommend people from each area, and then we would bring those people in. Now, these will be open to the public. However, they would be like a board work session where the people at the round table will be there to learn of all the data that we've pulled together and then have a discussion. So the Planning Commission, the board members would be welcome to come as well as the public, but the discussions would be centered around those people at that table. And then all of that information will be brought together and brought back to the board to consider options for moving forward. We have a proposed timeline. This is a very aggressive timeline where we want to make sure that we move this forward. This is an important issue for the board, and so we will do our analysis in January and February. We will conduct public outreach in March and April, and then we will present to the board in May. We will come back to the board on the second meeting in May for some recommendations of next steps, and then in June, we could hold possible public hearings to consider strategies or ordinance amendments. If these ordinance amendments affect a large number of property owners, that would include a large mailing out to all those property owners, so we may want to do a joint public hearing just to save taxpayer money on that large mailing. Since this is such an aggressive schedule, we will probably be bringing in some help from some consultants, not only to gather the data, do interviews with people that'll give a third-party reflection so that it's not the county asking these people. We'll get better data, we feel, and also to help us facilitate these public roundtables. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Smith? Okay, guess you did a great job. No questions, Mr. Smith.
Thank you very much.
All right, lastly, we have item number 18. The final item of new business is the review of our enhanced financial oversight policies and procedures and our guidelines for capital construction projects. Wow, that's a mouthful. Mr. Presley.
Madam Chair, members of the board, the purpose of this is just to give board different options and approaches to dealing with enhancing the financial oversight of the major capital projects. As a background, obviously the board has expressed a lot of concern on this issue in at least the recent year that I've been here. And in fact, with the strategic planning process, they identified priority 7.2 that county will develop a plan for financial oversight for school construction projects. We've kind of expanded that to include all major capital construction projects, because what we found as we've been doing this work is that we can use enhancements on both sides of the street. So staff is proposing to approach this in three main areas. The first is the annual operating transfer appropriation to schools. The second is capital project appropriations. And the third is the procurement policy and procedure enhancements, that some of which you've seen recently. With regard to annual appropriation transfers, as you well know, Virginia Code allows you to do that in one of two ways. It's either lump sum, which has been the tradition here, or you can do it categorically, and the 7 categories are listed here. I won't go into each one of those, but one of those being the facilities category. In practice, like I said, the board has generally utilized the lump sum approach rather than categorical. Staff had initially believed that we might be able to do a hybrid option of these two approaches, where we would do lump sum for all the categories with the exception of facilities, and that would give you that oversight that you might desire with respect to these capital projects. However, in consultation with the county attorney's office, it was determined that this would not be allowed under the state law, and that was not the intent of the law as it was written. Therefore, the board would need to select either or, so the lump sum or the categorical. While the categorical might provide you with the ability to prevent some of those year-end transfers that were spoken about earlier from one category to another without your prior approval, it would also lead to less than optimal spending decisions, or could. Whereas if you had money left over in a certain category at the end of the year, not being able to transfer it without your permission, it might encourage spending down as opposed to coming to you and say, this is where we really need it, or just being able to do that on their own. So as a result, staff really feels like we need to do a little bit more evaluation on this issue, and we'll come back to you with some with a recommendation as we've developed those. Also to do with the appropriations, currently the board withholds 5% of the local appropriation. They do that for both sides of the street, again, for both the county budget and the school budget. And mid-year, you're asked to release that 5% based upon the needs. Now, the county currently provides you with a report of the status of the revenues and expenditures to support that 5% request. Sometimes we request the 5, sometimes we request 2. The schools have not historically presented a similar report where we are making the recommendation that the school shall provide you with the same level of report in the request for that 5% hold. That would give you a little bit more oversight into what's been done the year to date at that mid-year point. Now, with respect to the capital projects appropriations, you're aware of some of the changes. We just witnessed one of them earlier in the consent agenda, item number 3, that was pulled by Supervisor Maurer. Basically, appropriations will be made by project phase, and we've started that practice as of September of this year. Those phases are land acquisition, design, construction, contingency, and FF&E. Each time they come, or we come before you for an appropriation of a phase, we have to give an accounting of the previous categories, where those budgets are, what's been spent, what's been encumbered, and then where everything is. And if there's any underspending at that point, you could say then, well, we're only going to give you X amount to bring you up to that level. That report will be provided each time the request is made, and you will see that actually for the Fredericksburg Christian School accounting.
Ms. Maurer?
I would also like you guys to research whether or not we can do that language not to exceed, the contracted amount not
Sure.
to exceed. It just might be a little easier than getting kind of into a fist fight because they've added some add-ons later because the money had been appropriated, and so then it becomes part of the contracted amount, if you understand
Absolutely.
what I'm looking for, and unless my colleagues have an objection to that.
No objection.
We will absolutely look into that. The third area that we looked at was procurement enhancements. The board has seen some of the changes we've made to that policy already. So in support of the board's intention to provide shared service and new procedures, we have hired an individual to kind of oversee that process for centralized control of procurements across the board, especially important with these larger capital projects. So central purchasing now oversees all procurements, county and schools, through the life cycle of the project. Previously with the schools, you might be aware that we issued the RFPs, we posted them up there, and then turned over what we received back to the schools. The new process will be that we track that project through its completion, not to say that we don't manage the contract, but we do manage the procurement, and that's critical that's a critical change. And additionally, we have now developed a process that will allow us oversight with respect to any change in scope. So particularly with respect to if a bid comes in over our projected budget. So historically, on both sides of the street, when that happened, the county or the schools would negotiate with a low bidder to value engineer the project, and then would come back to try to get it within the budgeted amount, or would come back to their respective boards asking for a greater appropriation. This puts limits to that. It gives process to that. It gives that ability. Previously, our policy did not allow for that, but it was being done. So this is something that we've kind of taken control of, and purchasing will oversee that. Any changes to the actual contract will then have to be approved by central purchasing, and then will be posted online for everybody to see to make it a more open and transparent process. I believe Ms. Shelton.
That is great. Ms. Shelton?
Yeah. I'm sorry, I have one question. You said value engineering. Do you really mean descoping, or you mean value engineering?
As it was described to me, it's value engineering, but it's probably a little bit of both. But the point of the purchasing, central purchasing administrator having the approval of this is that it can't be a descoping, because that would change what everyone else bid on. So if it's value engineered, so there are limits to what they can do without changing the scope to the point that it's no longer a competitive bid, at which point you'd have to go back out. So summary of the recommendation is that the school will provide that mid-year expenditure report to accompany any request for the release of that 5%. Accounting of previously appropriated funds and project updates shall accompany all requests for appropriations for each project phase of construction. And again, that's both sides of the street on that one. And then finally, staff will conduct additional research on the categorical appropriation options and what else we can do. And we'll also follow up on Supervisor Maurer's request for that language change with respect to the contract amount. And if that, take any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Presley? Great job. Thank you.
Madam Chair, a motion to approve that would formally get us to amend our procedures. If we could get that from you all, that would be helpful, just so that the schools have some clarity about your expectations.
But because it's new business, we would have to declare this time sensitive.
Right, just wanted you to know that that's the action we'll be looking for.
Okay.
Is it
Yeah.
time sensitive, Mr. Foley? That's how I interpret your
It
comment.
is kind of time
Yeah,
sensitive
Madam
because we're
Chair,
meeting
because-
with them at 5 o'clock, correct?
No, we feel it's fine to carry to the next meeting.
Okay.
And then we'll have this discussion and put it
Okay.
for final action.
But we can discuss what was presented at today's meeting very easily.
Well, we've provided all this information to the school board. So, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
I'm sorry, Mr. Cohen?
Well, then I'm but the next meeting we could do anything is a month from now. It's the
That
end
is
of
correct.
January.
That is correct.
So that's why I don't have any problem making it time sensitive, so they can have more time to be sensitive to the way we'd like to do things.
Yeah, I agree. It's taken us over 2 years to get to this point, and I think we've really got a good thing going right now, and I don't want to slow it down anymore. I move that we waive the bylaws to approve this today.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any that's correct, to waive the bylaws, as this is time
Just to
sensitive.
clarify, this is to declare it time sensitive rather than waiving your bylaws.
Correct. Time sensitive.
Ms. McClendon, you look thoughtful.
Okay, I have a motion and I have a second. Any discussion?
Ms. McClendon
Okay.
looks thoughtful.
Cast your vote, please. Tally the vote, please. I'm sorry. Motion passes unanimously, declaring this as time sensitive. Do I
make
have a motion?
I make a motion to approve this.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a friendly amendment to that motion. Oh, sure. I'm sorry, I just want to include the way the resolutions are written, and if appropriate. And so I would like to include that, the not to exceed, if you would accept that.
I accept that.
Okay, I
Second.
have an amendment and a friendly amendment and a second. Any discussion? Please cast your vote. Tally the vote. Motion passes unanimously, and now we do have 29 minutes to go into closed session and maybe address a few things before our meeting with the school board. So, Mr. Snellings, give you the honors.
A resolution to authorize closed meeting, whereas the board desires to hold a closed meeting for 1, consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members regarding compliance with county financial policies and regarding cluster development provisions. 2, discussion and consideration of the acquisition of real property for a public purpose, where a discussion in the open meeting would advertently affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the board. And 3, discussion concerning a prospective business where no previous announcement has been made of the business interest in locating its facility in the county. And whereas pursuant to Virginia Code 2.2-3711, A3, A5, and A7, such discussions may occur in closed meetings. So moved.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Cast your vote. Tally the vote. The board is now in closed session. Thank you. Okay, seeing none, cast your vote, please. Tally the vote. Motion passes unanimously. That concludes our business for this afternoon. The board will now go into the ABC conference room for a joint meeting with the school board and reconvene back in the board chambers at 7:00 p.m. Thank you. Supervisor Tom Cohen is going to lead us in a prayer, and Mrs. Shelton will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. If you could please stand.
Lord, we thank you for our many blessings, particularly family and friends. In this hectic season, which is important to so many faiths and philosophies, may we have the spirit of the season in our hearts, kindness, charity, and love. Please be with those who have lost someone this past year, especially Lieutenant Colonel Kevin Herman's family, as well as the family and friends of President George H.W. Bush. When someone passes, it creates a void, particularly at this time of year. Please fill these voids with warm memories and happy thoughts of these beloved people. Please be with our men and women who are in the military, who are protecting us, and be with their families as they are away from home. Be with our police, fire, and emergency personnel as they continue to serve their community so often in dangerous situations. We thank you for our living in a country where the people have a say in decision-making. Help us remember the traits that the founders held in high regard. May we remember that acrimony and rudeness does not bring about consensus, but brings contempt, that it does not bring respect, but disrespect. We ask that we aspire to treat others as we would like to be treated. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So tonight we have a very special presentation, and we have two true heroes that are with us today. One of them is United States Navy Lieutenant David Doucette and United States Coast Guard Chief Warrant Officer Chuck Shipley. And the survivor who is with us today is Jim Hendrick. If you could please come forward at this time. So, you know, we have so many things in our world every day that are maybe not the most pleasant that we deal with, but this is a true thing. With you. I wasn't there, so I'm not going to tell the story because I don't think I could do just for it. But I am going to let the microphone be had by these gentlemen who saved Mr. Hendrick's life on I-95 on September 10th.
Thank you, everybody. Does this thing work? Yes, it's already on. Thank you. I'm delighted to be here tonight with these gentlemen that are my true heroes, Carl and Dave. And the story that I don't remember much about because I was heading from my fiance's house to my mom's house on 95, usually get off on Route 610, and I decided to detour and go up to 17 to pick up a prescription. And somewhere on the way, I just kind of lost everything. I blacked out. My car went into some Jersey barriers, ended up on the side of the road, unconscious. And Dave and his wife come by first. They seen that I was in distress, so they stopped to assist in helping me. Like I say, I don't know a whole lot about it. And then I think Dave broke out the window of the car to shut my car off and make everything safe. And Carl come up, and these two wonderful guys together got me out of the car, started CPR, had to call the rescue squad and everything, and got the help I needed. And today I'm so grateful to just be standing here with them. I mean, these are my true heroes. And like I say, most of the story I don't know because I was out of it. And I want to thank him greatly from the bottom of my heart. They are my heroes.
Thank you, Jim. I was just fortunate to, that it's my daily commute home, and, exit 140, is turned into a pretty much of a roadblock there, as, with all the construction going on. And this day, as I was driving by, I happened to see Jim laying over his steering wheel. I saw Dave and that knocking out his window. I immediately, you know, came from the right lane to the left lane as fast as I could. Just as, you know, I got to the vehicle, myself and Dave, and we had one other gentleman that was with us that remains unnamed. Managed, you know, we grabbed Jim, pulled him out of his car, and, you know, my second nature being a coastie, you know, this isn't the first time I've done CPR, and you know, the instincts kick in, and, you know, you run with it, and luckily, you know, we had the rescue squad and the fire trucks that were coming down. And you hear them tell their story, you know, as they're approaching. You know, they were stuck in the traffic just like we were, you know. But you know, to be able to roll through it and then have them come in and take over, it was, you know, it's textbook. You couldn't have planned it any better, you know. And luckily, you got, you know, the exit you chose was the exit, you know, the fire department was right off of. So yeah, I'm just thankful that I was placed in your life that day.
Yeah, we have an interesting story where my wife and I were coming back from Walter Reed, and we are now pregnant from that trip, so that's a blessing. And so, although we live in Virginia Beach, you know, in Luke chapter 10, the Lord says, you know, take care of your neighbor if you see him in need. So we saw you. We knew something had to be done. So I'm just glad that we could be a part of that and just help you out. I wouldn't want it any other way, and I appreciate your help. And I'll tell you, I really appreciate what your guys do every single day. They're out there taking care of people, so I just want to give a very public thank you to the public servants who take care of us. So thank you.
So when we talk about out-of-hospital cardiac arrest, the numbers aren't good. Only about 30% of the people who have a heart attack outside of the hospital actually survive. And of those 30%, only about 10% of those make it out of the hospital to live normal everyday lives. And Mr. Kendrick is here today because of the actions of these true heroes. They knew CPR, they were in the right place at the right time, and they acted. And I can't stress enough how important it is for everybody to know CPR. If you want to know CPR, please call Fire Headquarters 658-7200, and we will find you a CPR class. So thank you guys for what you did. And Mr. Kendrick, you look great, and it's great to see you here.
And at this point, I would like to just read the proclamation. We have a proclamation for both of you. Whereas Hartwood resident Mr. Jim Kendrick suffered cardiac arrest on September 10th, 2018 while driving south on Interstate 95 in Stafford County. And whereas Chief Warrant Officer Shipley noticed Mr. Kendrick was in distress and pulled over on busy Interstate 95. And whereas Chief Warrant Officer Shipley started performing CPR along with U.S. Navy Lieutenant David Doucette. And whereas Chief Warrant Officer Shipley and Lieutenant Doucette performed CPR until the arrival of Stafford County Fire and Rescue, resulting in Mr. Kendrick's eventual survival and recovery. And whereas less than 8% of people who suffer a cardiac arrest outside a hospital setting survive. And whereas Chief Warrant Officer Shipley's selfless act in helping Mr. Kendrick demonstrates his dedication to the service of others. Now therefore, be it proclaimed by the Stafford County Board of Supervisors on this, the 11th day of December, 2018, that it be and hereby does recognize and commend Chief Warrant Officer Chuck Shipley for his heroic actions in saving the life of Stafford County resident Mr. Jim Hendrick. And obviously the same goes in the other proclamation. So I thank you for driving up from Virginia Beach tonight. I know the traffic was a little dicey, as it always is on 95. And thank you very much for coming out tonight. And God bless you, and I hope you all have a happy holiday. That's a great story. Great story. Thank you, gentlemen.
For somebody that doesn't talk, you did pretty good.
Yeah.
You did real good.
Thanks. That was my Christmas gift right there. Okay. Now we have presentations by the public. If you would like to comment, please remain courteous and respectful to members of the audience and to the board. If you're here to speak about one of this evening's public hearings, please hold your comments until the public hearing is opened. Each speaker is allowed 3 minutes. Speak slowly and clearly into the microphone and begin by stating your name and address. Please refer to the light on the podium to monitor your time. Green indicates the start of your remarks. Yellow indicates you have 1 minute to summarize your comments, and red obviously indicates your time is up. So tonight I have 2 speaker cards. The first is Lynn Conroe.
Good evening. My name is Lynn Conroe. I am president of the HOA of Oakley Reserve in Hartwood, and I thank you for hearing me this evening. I'm here on behalf of our HOA because our documentation states that on our lots we are not allowed to have professional commercial vehicles, but the roadways within our development are public VDOT roads. And we have had in the last few months several of those commercial vehicles, such as semis, coming in and parking within our development. And with all of the children that are in our development, we find that that's a detriment to the development. And so we wanted to request that our VDOT roads be have restricted parking so that there's no commercial vehicles, no semis can park within our development. So that is our request.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Somebody from the board will be in touch with you.
Thank you.
The next speaker card I have is Mr. Tim Haddix.
Good evening, ma'am, members of the board. I'm Tim Haddix, 38 Sunset Drive. Again, I come in front of you concerning Decatur Road, which I live at the very far end of. I will say first off that it was impressive how they cleared Decatur Road after the snowstorm the other day. 3 days prior to that, due to some damage along a timbering road on Decatur Road, a lot of the sidewalls, the waterways got worn out, and we had a lot of flooding. VDOT came out, they took care of that. They got that cleared before it froze and before the snow, so I applaud those efforts. But I still come to you to say that the problem is Decatur Road itself. I do realize that previous estimates from VDOT to totally fix that road are about $15 million. That's a lot of money, and I understand budget. Looking at alternatives, it appears that to add 2 feet to that road, put it within county and state standards, that it would cost less than $400,000 or in that area. Therefore, that would facilitate Decatur Road not falling off of your list of priorities. We ask that. If you widen it, resurface it, put some lines on it, fix the ditches along the road, you're going to have to do that anyway if you resurface. That, if anything, is a help. It's not a total cure, but it's a lot more than we've gotten in the past. And again, I'll mention that we typically get kicked off the list somewhere along the line. We ask that that not happen. I once again ask that the board give every ounce of consideration in fixing Decatur Road to the degree that you can within your budget constraints, and move us up on your list, and don't eventually drop us off as has been done in the past. Again, I encourage you all to take a field trip up Decatur Road. Tomorrow morning would be a perfect time. Take a good look, because seeing is believing. I truly believe that. And I thank you for your time, and I'll probably see you next meeting. Have a good night and Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Okay, I do have other speaker cards, but these are for the one of the public hearings. But if there is somebody in the board chambers that would like to address the board that is not on a public hearing, you could please come forward at this point in time.
Paul Waldowski, 8 Pickett Lane in the gerrymandered Rock Hill District. I was here this afternoon, so I will not repeat myself, and you said you had a Christmas present? Well, I brought you some tic-tac-toe because that's what chairmen do who are selected. Now, for the rest of you, I brought you a bag of coal. I just love that, let's see, that Fulton Shop Road. My favorite is in the George Washington district, some Dunkin' Donuts. Can't wait till those come out there. You call it George Washington district, but it's really the town of Falmouth. Now, Griffiths Whitewater, of course, you know, it's been 30 years and I still don't get a county water and sewer bill. So I call the pictures on the wall of shame. So if you ever get on there, watch out. Now, let's see, in the Rock Hill district, we have a lot of grandstanding that goes around. You know, this afternoon I heard about $400,000 that we got to control. And it must be my district. Well, none of you have a district. It's our district. It's our county. There's 120,961 of us. And always remember, respect merits respect. I do listen to the invocation, but I also know Colossians 2:8. Beware of the philosophies of men and not of things according to Christ. Deal or no deal? Oh, you can counter now. Let's see. Hardwood. I heard up the board and said that the supervisor was on the board 17 years. I think she's out of touch. I think this finishes your 13th year. They're still prime members. And we know that developers don't like it when they can't have clustered subdivisions. Now I'm practicing because I'm going to the school board and I'll wear my real Grinch outfit that you saw at 3 p.m. And when I was talking to the JW outside, you know, the Jehovah Witnesses, I always talk to them because my dad's initials were JW, John Waldowski. I'm Paul John Waldowski, so maybe we should have pjw.org. We have 15 seconds. But I've told you before, brains got internet, thinks got internet, minds got internet. And let's stop the grandstanding about internet, because everyone needs it.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the board this evening?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Angela Ferrugi, and I reside at 262 New Hope Church Road in Mr. Cohen's district. I am here this evening as a concerned citizen and mother of Stafford County. As you all are well aware, we had a snowstorm come through on Sunday, and as a result, we closed Stafford County Public Schools yesterday and today. What you may not be aware of is that Stafford County Parks and Rec, which is run by Stafford County Administration Center, chose not to cancel activities last night. And my children are 4.5 years old. I have twins, and they are enrolled in the gymnastics program. Last night was supposed to be their end of the year Christmas celebration, superstar celebration is what they called it. The girls were so excited to go. We invited grandparents, and when the snowstorm came through, I thought, okay, this is going to be canceled. So I called the gymnastics center at 10 a.m. when they opened, and I was told, and I called back in the afternoon, I was told by two separate individuals that they were not run by Stafford County Public Schools, and as such, the decision to cancel or to hold activities did not follow the Stafford County Public Schools. I said, well, surely they're not going to have this event tonight. And all I was told twice was that as far as they knew, all regularly scheduled programming activities were going to go through and to monitor Stafford County alerts for any changes. So that's what I did. And much to my disappointment, they never canceled the celebration. They never postponed it. As a mother, I made the decision that it was not safe to take my children out on the roads. After snow had started to melt and we had some potential for refreeze, the celebration was going to go as late as 8 p.m. last night, and I did not feel it was safe to take my children out on the road. Stafford County Public Schools made it clear where they thought our children should be during the snow event, and that was at home. I was very disappointed that Stafford County Parks and Rec did not follow suit. I explained to my 4-year-olds why we weren't going to go, and I told them we would trim our tree and we would bake cookies instead, and they were okay with that. But what really concerns me is that in this program, there are 16 and 17-year-old athletes in this program as well. And they were forced to make the decision to get on the road and drive. I have some confidence in my driving abilities. None of us can control black ice, but I have some confidence in my driving abilities. I am concerned for the 16 and the 17-year-olds who had to make the decision to either not participate in a program in which they were excited, I'm sure, that all their friends had been abuzz at Stafford County Gymnastics about they were buying special ribbons for their hair and special leotards, and they had to make the decision whether or not to go. And I was very disappointed that a different decision was not made, and I ask that you guys look into that. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to address the board? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close the public comment. We have 2 public hearings this evening. The first is to consider an amendment to county code to amend or create a definition regarding e-commerce and home businesses and to apply it to the county's zoning ordinance. Mr. Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, board members. I'm Jeff Harvey, the Director of Planning and Zoning, and this public hearing is to consider adoption of Ordinance 018-06, which would amend the zoning ordinance for the county. This ordinance takes a comprehensive review of rehabilitating and readjusting our view with regard to home-based businesses. And e-commerce has been a factor that sort of changed the way we've had to look at home-based businesses in the county. The proposed amendment specifically would modify existing terms in the code dealing with home business. It's being renamed to Home Business 1. It will change the definition of home occupation, rural home business, as well as manufacturing for light and heavy manufacturing uses. We create new definitions for e-commerce, a new home business classification known as Home Business 2, and specifying handicraft, as in the types of activities you normally see associated with someone crafting for sale of goods within their home. Some background on this application or amendment: we've seen a number of requests over time within our office, with the Board of Zoning Appeals, and with the Planning Commission about home-based businesses and how things have changed. The Board of Zoning Appeals specifically had concerns about firearm sales being conducted out of homes. Currently, our regulations stipulate for a home business, you're not allowed to have customers come to your home. However, under federal firearms licensing requirements, if you are selling a firearm, you have to physically see the person there on premises in front of you to verify that they can receive the weapon. And I'll get into some more details on how that fits into this overall situation. This was discussed back with the Community and Economic Development Committee last year, and it's been back and forth with the Planning Commission on a number of times to try to get a global encompassing amendment. The Planning Commission set up a committee to study this, but when they got into the details, especially about the firearms transfer situation, we realized the state code does not allow the localities to treat firearm sales any different than any other retail sales or home business within the county. So that will not be treated as a separate category. Now, initially, when this ordinance was being discussed, it was thought that they could be treated separately and different, but they can no longer be so. The Commission did focus on all businesses conducted in home in their review of the overall amendment. We surveyed a number of localities surrounding our area, including Fredericksburg, Culpeper County, Fauquier, Fairfax, Henrico, King George, Spotsylvania, and Prince William. The ordinance was drafted and realized that we needed to include additional zoning districts. For instance, some of our home-based businesses are limited to certain zoning districts because they're limited to single-family homes. And we found out with home occupations, especially with e-commerce, you don't necessarily need customers to come to your home, but maybe they don't all need to be conducted in a single-family dwelling. We also realized that we didn't allow for these types of uses in some of our planned districts, so that was expanded as to where they could be applied to. In November of this year, the Planning Commission finalized its recommendations and forwarded this amendment to the board for consideration of adoption. Specifically, it's amending the definition of home occupation to include e-commerce, as the type of use business that's permitted. And we would also rename home business to home business 1, and home business 1 would be subject to certain conditions, that it be accessory to a by right use in a single-family dwelling without approval of a special exception, so it'd be a by right activity. It's limited to the number of visits to the home from customers. There'd be also limitations on the hours of operation. There would have to be provisions for off-street parking, and it would replace, as I mentioned, the term home business with home business 1 in all the applicable zoning districts. So for all these home-based businesses, people will have to come into the county and receive a zoning permit for their activity, and that zoning permit will spell out for them the conditions stipulated in the code. For home business 2, this would be a little bit more intense activity. There would be ability to have employees other than family members living in the house. They would be limited to no more than 2 employees. And there would be allowed to have customers come on site, but there's limited hours of operation again. Also, they must have off-street parking. And then there's also the ability to potentially have storage associated with the business either in the house or in an accessory structure outdoors. This type of business, since it's more intense, would require a special exception. The special exception would be with the Board of Zoning Appeals, subject to a public hearing to give the adjacent neighbors a chance to voice in as to whether they felt the proposed business was compatible with their neighborhood. We would also amend some of the requirements for rural home businesses. Those generally apply to properties that are zoned for agricultural use on lots 3 acres or larger and mainly located outside the urban services area. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the focus was creating a definition of e-commerce and what that is. And also we didn't have a definition for handicraft. So we tried to incorporate those things into the code and specifically said that handicrafts are not considered to be industrial uses, so they're excluded from the definition of light and heavy industrial. And in your board package, you saw a chart that kind of showed the various different types of home-based businesses, and you can kind of see there's how they go in intensity. A home occupation based on the amendment could now go in any zoning district and could go in any type of dwelling. As I mentioned before, our current regulations do not allow home occupations other than in single-family detached dwellings. But with the advent of e-commerce, it really is no longer necessary to be restricted to a larger dwelling because a lot of e-commerce is done without any interaction with customers other than online. The home business 1 would also be a by right use, but it would have no other employees other than just the family member. So again, it would look exactly and act exactly like a typical single family dwelling. Where you get into the home business 2 and rural home business, that's where you have the issue of employees, customers coming to the property, and there may need to be some impacts mitigated.
Excuse me, Ms. Maurer.
Okay, so employees, how would you deal with contract staff? So when I look at the home rural business, you could have 2 employees, let's just say, and still have a very large event venue in an accessory structure that's 4,000 square feet and have multiple contract staff members working the event at one time. Do you understand how there's a difference between an employee or a contract staff member?
Yes, and some of that may end up getting worked out in a special exception with the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Okay.
But generally for a home-based business, it's the number of employees who are reporting to that location for the businesses. That's what we're mainly concerned about.
I'm looking more at the rural one where it says no more than, and it doesn't require a special exception, 3 employees. Is it possible for us to put a slash and say, or contracted staff, or contracted support? Ms. McClendon, do you understand what the difficulty that I'm having with that? It's on page 10 of 19 of attachment 3.
And Ms. Bauer, a rural home business does require a special exception. It currently does and is proposed to remain as such in this amendment.
Okay, it does require a special exception.
So in those cases, the Board of Zoning Appeals can set reasonable conditions for the operation of the business. and be mainly focused on what's happening on the property itself. A lot of businesses, you actually do the work elsewhere, not necessarily on the property, so that wouldn't be so much regulated as far as the home-based business for that particular property. So in your situation you're describing, someone may have a catering business where they go off-site and they have 20 people show up to an event, but that's not necessarily all of what is focused on with the home-based business.
Yeah. I'm more concerned about, quite frankly, is a wedding venue popping up on 3 acres and this definition, but with a special exception, I'm okay.
And this is continues with the chart. The rural home business and the home business 2 allow you to have additional vehicles on the property that are related to the business, as well as outdoor storage and or indoor storage, not necessarily in the primary structure. We believe that the ordinance does provide a comprehensive change to how the county views home-based businesses and is trying to keep up with modern times. There are the opportunities to make sure that it's keeping in focus with the neighborhood, whereas the more intense uses that have the employees and the hours of operation where people can come to the property can be specifically limited through the ordinance, as well as additional conditions imposed by the Board of Zoning Appeals through a special exception. As I mentioned earlier, the Plan Commission recommended adoption of this ordinance, and staff does as well. Be happy to answer any more questions you all may have.
Any questions for Mr. Harvey? Okay. Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Harvey. I'm going to open the public hearing. The same rules apply. You have 3 minutes to address the board. Please state your name and address. And when the red light comes on, your time is up. When the yellow light is present, you have 1 minute to wrap up your comments. So let's see, this is Holly Corner. Okay, I do have 4 speaker cards, but these are all for the public hearing that is after this. Is there anyone that would like to address the board on this? If so, please come forward.
I'm sorry, is this about the Burton Farm?
No, that is the next public hearing. Okay, seeing no one, with that, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring this back to the board. We have 018-06.
Madam Chairman, I'm going to make a motion to approve this ordinance.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and I have a second. Is there any discussion?
I just want to thank staff. I know this is 2 years in the making, and this primarily came up as a result of repeated BZA hearings and trying to get that definition with e-commerce. We were having very much difficulty with, people being able to utilize the internet, and home-based businesses just aren't what they used to be. And so you guys really did well in creating these definitions, and so I want to say thank you.
Okay, Ms. Shelton.
I'd also like to say thank you, because one of the things I really liked is how flexible we made it. And so some of our peer communities have made it very, very hard to have a home business. And we looked at what our opportunities were, and we made it much easier for people to operate from home. So thank you.
Mr. Cohen.
Just very quickly, I'd like to thank staff as well. This started way back when I was on the Planning Commission. So, and I also thank the members of the Planning Commission, because it took a great amount of work to work through this. And this is an example of how Stafford's trying to become very usable for businesses in the 21st century. So I thank both the staff and the Planning Commission.
Great job, Mr. Harvey. All right, with that, please cast your vote for 018-06. Tally the vote. That motion passes unanimously. We have one more public hearing. This is a zoning reclassification from the A1 zoning district to the R2 urban residential / medium density located in the Hartwood district. Mr. Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is a zoning reclassification for a project known as Holly Corner Manor. It's rezoning application case number RC 18152255. The proposal is to rezone the agricultural property to a residential zoning classification to accommodate a new neighborhood of 120 homes. The parcel is tax map parcel 43-64. The total property is approximately 48.6 acres. The applicant is Holly Corner Associates LLC, and the owner is O. Stansberry Burton Jr. This map shows the location of the property within the county. It's generally in the location near Stofford Lakes. It's off of the south side of Holly Corner Road in the Route 17 corridor. The as you can see by the map, Stofford Lakes is immediately to the east of this proposed rezoning area. This is a zoning map that shows the site in relation to the surrounding properties. Stofford Lakes in this area is zoned R1 suburban residential. The other properties to the north, east, and south are zoned A2 rural residential and also A1 agricultural. This is an aerial view of the site as it currently exists. It's primarily open land with a existing single-family dwelling and a number of agricultural farm buildings. The property generally has a ridge line that runs through this area, and then we have topography sloping generally in the direction east and west. This shows you a street side view of the existing driveway to the house from the property. And this is the generalized development plan which is proposed for the project. This generalized development plan shows a network of streets with a single entrance off of Holly Corner Road in this location here. There would also be an interparcel connection to Stofford Lakes, which would connect into that neighborhood. The applicant is proposing with this project to phase the development to try to address concerns with traffic flow. Specifically, they would have 3 phases, a 44-lot phase in this location. This is phase 1. Then phase 2 would be in this location here, and that'd be 43 lots, and then 33 lots in the final phase. The site proposes a number of potential stormwater management facilities and open space located in the west and east parts of the project. That coincides with the topography of the land being in the low areas. Also, there would be substantial open space along Holly Corner Road to try to provide a buffer between the residents and Holly Corner Road itself. And then there would be a recreational parcel within the center of the project to accommodate a tot lot. The comprehensive plan recommends this property for suburban development. Suburban development in the comprehensive plan recommends single-family detached dwellings at a maximum density of 3 dwelling units per acre. It also supports the location of community-serving retail and community-serving amenities for suburban areas. Community-serving retail and community-serving amenities would generally be buildings that are 3 stories or less in height and are in character with the suburban area. With regard to the rezoning, staff reviewed impacts to public facilities, specifically schools, parks and recreation, public safety, transportation, general government, and libraries. The comprehensive plan has recommendations for infrastructure phasing that basically recommends that new development proposals will be phased to coincide with adequate infrastructure and not be developed until the projected infrastructure and services has been implemented or scheduled to be phased concurrently with demand. I will highlight our review of those infrastructure facility types here momentarily. We'll start off with schools. The 120-lot subdivision based on student generation rates would estimate 115 new students for this project at how things exist today currently. There'd be 52 elementary school students, 29 middle school students, and 34 middle school students. The chart that was provided here on this slide takes into account an additional 16 by right units that could have been yielded from the project. So the proffer mitigation that's being proposed is for 104 units. When we looked at the school capacity for this area, Hartwood Elementary School currently has no capacity to accommodate this project. There is adequate capacity for Gale Middle School and Mountain View High School. With regard to Parks and Recreation, we looked at the 2017 Parks Utilization Plan, and this area has not been identified as having any deficits for parks. We did also look at public safety, and Station 12 serves this site. Currently, there is a deficit for level of service. We look at level of service for public safety primarily through fire and rescue, and the response times. The goal is to have 90% of your response times within 8 minutes or less. The current rate is 65%. So there is a current deficit with fire and rescue. Also with transportation, there were, I'll point out that this is the site, and the applicant has made two proffers with regard to transportation improvements, specifically dedicating right-of-way and providing improvements for their entrance to their project, as well as providing additional improvements on Holly Corner Road as the road approaches Route 17. The proposal includes an additional right turn lane on the approach to Route 17 to attempt to mitigate impacts for traffic and the queuing for this intersection. When we looked at the traffic study and what the outcomes were, if nothing happens today, well, I should say the current situation at that intersection of Route 17 Holly Corner Road has a level of service F for the eastbound and left and right turns going out of Holly Corner Road onto Route 17. That's the current condition. If nothing happened, this project was not approved, it'd still stay at an F, and you can kind of see from these numbers it would degrade. With this project being built but no mitigation, it gets even worse. However, with the proposed turn lane improvements that are proffered with the application, we'll note that it still stays at a level of service F for the left turn going sort of northbound on Route 17, but the right turn out of Holly Corner would improve to a level of service C. That would give a...
Mr. Snellings?
Mr. Harvey, is this the VDOT study?
This is their traffic impact analysis that was submitted with the application.
Okay.
And VDOT reviewed this study as well as staff.
VDOT signed off on it?
They concurred with the findings of the study.
Good, thank you.
So overall, the improvements would help with the intersection, but would not resolve the left turn movement going out of Holly Corner Road onto Route 17. And this is an excerpt from the Generalized Development Plan, which shows the configuration of how the lanes would look. You'd have the right lane arrowing you to go right, and the left lane would arrow you to go left, which would cross Route 17 in the median to go northbound. In discussion of the rezoning application, the Planning Commission had concerns about the current condition of Holly Corner Road. Staff notes the fire marshal believes that for safe transportation access, that roadway should be a minimum of 20 feet wide. Currently, if this project connects in with Stafford Lakes, all the roadways within Stafford Lakes exceed 20 feet in width. However, the commission was concerned that some of the traffic will end up using Holly Corner Road.
Excuse me for 1 sec. Ms. Shelton?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Harvey. In our road study today, we listed Holly Corner as being a level B, which was pretty, I mean, it's a really high standard. And so how can it be a B if the fire department has a problem with it?
Madam Chairman, Ms. Shelton, I don't specifically know what that B term is being used for, but many times level of service is a function of how many cars can go down a road, not necessarily how safe the road is. And The issue that the fire marshal raised on pavement width is a safety concern for them for fire access. So that was the
I'm
thing.
just wondering about our road study, if there's an error in it that we rated that road really high, and yet there's a safety concern for fire trucks. Just
Michelle,
asking.
and Madam Chairman,
That's
I'll
something
double
we'll
check
have to
with
talk
Mr.
to
Dayton.
Mr. Dayton about.
Yeah.
So the applicant went ahead and studied Holly Corner Road to provide a listing of what the pavement widths were from these various road sections, as you can see from this diagram. They basically start from the proposed entrance and go towards Holly Corner Road. When we look at the overall spots that were studied, 6 of those spots are less than 20 feet in width. The narrowest is 18 and a half feet, but there are several of them that are 19 and a half feet. So some of the spots do not meet the 20-foot wide requirement, and then others do. With regard to impacts to general government and public facilities, we note that there is a deficit with the courthouse complex. We need additional court space. As the board's well aware, that's a project in a CIP. We believe that at the staff level that it's highly likely that that deficit will be resolved at the time this project moves forward, if it should be approved. Regarding libraries, there's adequate existing levels of service that serve this area, and it would meet the needs beyond the build-out of this project under its current anticipated timeline. Regarding monetary proffers, this project does fall under the current legislation that was adopted in 2016, so there are limitations on what the board can ask for and or accept from a developer for off-site proffers, in other words, monetary proffers to mitigate public facilities impacts. And those categories are specifically limited to transportation, public safety, schools, and parks and recreation. So any impact to general government, such as the courts or libraries, cannot be mitigated by a developer. The code does not allow that. The proffer statement does include cash contributions for schools and public safety deficits. When we look at the...
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
Just before we get any further with this, especially since we're talking about the proffers and the impact on the schools, we just received the briefing upstairs at the work session that the schools have changed the capacity of Hartwood Elementary School to 660. So that would put it well within those numbers now. Now, when you first did your analysis of this, the design numbers were different, of course. They're program numbers now. And they all raised because they changed the class sizes, basically, and took out some pre-K. So I don't know whether you can use that argument anymore for the schools and as being overcrowded.
Well, thank you, Mr. Cavalier. Madam Chairman, that was a fact that staff was not aware of. And it kind of does point out the problem with the current proffer legislation in that you're constantly chasing the most recent data as you're reviewing this an application, and it kind of ties your hands on what the applicant can do as far as mitigating their impacts. So given that fact, staff would caution the board in accepting a proffer if there's adequate capacity for a school. So that we may need to revisit that issue because state code says that the board cannot accept an unreasonable proffer where there's adequate capacity for a public facility. With regard to what was being offered or currently being offered, it's approximately $14,204 per dwelling unit. As we went along the review process for determining what the proffer dollar value would be, we looked at what the cost was to provide a new elementary school. That cost changed while we were reviewing the application because of the work that was being done with regard to Moncure Elementary School rebuild. So that was one of the dynamics that you see with this proffer legislation and how it affects things. Public safety has a proffer dollar value of $1,148 per dwelling unit. And as mentioned, they're proposing specific off-site physical improvements for turn lanes with regard to transportation. They've made a number of proffers.
Mr. Dudenheffer?
Mr. Harvey, the off-site proffers that they're proposing, the streets are already failing, so they're not, is that a legal proffer to come in and make changes to an intersection that's that far away and doesn't really improve the traffic that much?
Supervisor Dudenheffer, Madam Chairman. Under state code, the applicant can make an off-site proffer if it's determined that a project creates the need for that improvement. Their project does further degrade the intersection, so their proposed improvement would resolve that problem. So they could make that proffer, but their proffer is not going to resolve all the problems of that intersection, just that primarily that one turning movement, the right turn towards eastbound Route 17.
Thank you.
The applicant has made other proffers which comply with our neighborhood design standards, specifically about the architectural design and what parts of the homes would have brick or stone, also about window placement and roof design. And these are some examples of what the houses might look like, but these specific designs are not proffered at this point in time. The proffers also speak to capping the number of dwelling units to 120. That would relate to a density below 3 units an acre, so it would meet the requirements of the comprehensive plan. The density would be 2.55 dwelling units an acre as the math works out. The applicant's also proffering that they would have restrictive covenants that would help ensure the high quality of the project as well as overall maintenance of the development. They've proffered the location of the tot lot and the timing of that. The transportation improvements, specifically the turn lane on Holly Corner Road to Route 17, would be proffered in a phased approach, specifically that it would be done before the first occupancy permit for the site. And also, they've provided phasing within the development to try to mitigate some of the impacts to the Stofford Lakes neighborhood by building the first section further away, and then also tying in to Stofford Lakes in the middle of the project rather than up front. And as I mentioned earlier, the monetary contributions. There are a number of positives. It's consistent with the land use recommendations for suburban development within the comprehensive plan. It's consistent with the surrounding development pattern for Stofford Lakes. The proffers would ensure consistency with that neighborhood with regard to the types of homes and their general appearance. There's mitigation being proposed for schools, public safety, and transportation, and it's consistent with infrastructure phasing policies in the comp plan, and the building designs are compatible with a number of our neighborhood design standards. As far as some of the negative concerns, the Plan Commission expressed that the application is premature because of Hartwood Elementary School capacity. And as we've heard tonight, maybe that's not an issue any longer. And then the Commission was also concerned about the current conditions of Holly Corner Road and it's able to handle traffic in a safe manner. Based on the new information I'm hearing tonight, staff would recommend deferral of this application to further evaluate what the school capacity is at Hartwood Elementary and how that would affect the offer of the proffers provided by the applicant. At the time when the Plan Commission held their public hearing and made their final vote on November 14th, they'd recommended denial. A vote of 6-0-1. Commissioner Vanucci was absent. And again, they made the recommendations for denial based on their concerns of the condition of Holly Corner Road and the school capacity.
Mr. Snellings?
What's the time limit on this? I think I read it in the background report, but I forgot it. So,
well, Mr. Snellings, I'll have to look at that in more detail. I don't recall off the top of my head.
But we're not up against the wall on it. we've got some time.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Harvey? Thank you very much for a very comprehensive review there of the application. Would the applicant like to come up?
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the Board of Supervisors. My name is Samar Shalaby. I'm with Development Consulting Services, 159 Litchfield Boulevard. I'm here on behalf of the application. I'm not going to go through, obviously, all the stuff that Mr. Harvey went through, but just a couple of quick things. We started this project over 2 years ago, and when we first started, the Hartwood Elementary had no capacity, and we were kind of looking at to see, evaluate the schools, everything else, and then there was some redistricting done, and they said, no, there is capacity, so it's okay. So we proposed the proffers and worked on that. Obviously, the new information is kind of new to me, but I guess the question I have is if this is that effective today, or is that effective the new school year? So if this, let's say it's going to be, I'm sorry? So as of today, today is capacity. Okay. Okay. So I'm saying just, again, it'd be interesting just to kind of see how it goes. But anyway, either way, like I said, obviously we have to go back and revisit that. With regard to the question about the Route 17, we basically analyzed that, and while it is failing today, the biggest failing movement is currently there was only one lane. So if I was trying to go north, take a left basically on 17, I stay up there and I back up traffic all the way. Even if someone's trying to turn, they can't turn. So by adding the extra lane, it actually allows the person to still stop, which is still going to be F because there's no traffic light. They have to wait until traffic kind of eases. But at least the right-hand movement that's going basically south on 17 can continue to move, and that's why it drops from F to C. So it does help the intersection quite a bit to keep people moving. And also the backup, instead of being, I think, the chart that Mr. Harvey put up was like 500 and some feet, it'll actually drop to like 140 feet, which means obviously a lot less cars have to wait. And then one thing that was with regard to the fire department, obviously that was a recommendation discussion about the 20 feet. I've been a resident of Stafford County for over 30 years. I'd love to say that all our roads would be, 30 foot wide and accommodate everything. Unfortunately, we are dealing with what we have. My road, I live off Richards Ferry Road, which is basically has the crucible and has all this other stuff. I went down afterwards, curiosity, just myself to measure, and Richards Ferry Road was about 16.5 feet to 18 feet. So it didn't even make over 18 except on one spot that I checked. So just unfortunately that's sometimes what happens. Anyway, I guess I'll kind of leave it at that. Just to kind of in terms of a timing, if this project was to pass, obviously construction would not start until probably 2020, and it'll be a 3-year project to be able to build out. So that way also from a phasing and timing, kind of make that clear. I'll be glad to answer any questions if there's anything.
Any questions for Mr. Shalaby? Looks like we're good.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, at this point in time, I'm going to open the public hearing on this item number 21. If you would like to address the board, you have 3 minutes. And I think everybody that is here heard my comments earlier. When the yellow light comes on, you have 1 minute, and when the red light illuminates, your time is up. I have a number of speaker cards here. I'm going to read them in the order they were given to me. The first one is Scott, and I'm having a hard time reading the last. Thank you. And what is your last name, please?
Clemens.
Clemens. Thank you.
Chicken scratch. Sorry. Yes, my name is Scott Clemens. I live at 8 Monument Drive in Augustine. I've been a resident here in Stafford for 20 years, and I'm going to actually speak in favor of this project. Living here in Stafford for 20 years, as I'm sure most of you have, we've seen the development come, and it's come hot and heavy. We've seen the improvements the county's made over the years, working with VDOT. We see it on our way to this meeting tonight with this courthouse road improvement. Very substantial change. I'll just have you know that 15 years ago, there was a bond passed by Stafford County to approve that improvement, and it's taken 15 years to get that work done. I'd like to ask kind of question what would be the improvement project for Holly Corner Road if it wasn't for this development? Is there any improvement planned? Is it in the VDOT schedule for improvement? What it looks like to me is, without this project, Holly Corner Road is going to continue to suffer. I bring that up because Courthouse Road, we've been suffering for many years, and we're now seeing that improvement. It takes a lot of work on behalf of the developments that are already there, as well as the developers coming in offering these proffers. So I'd like to just make that point that you can't stop this development. It's coming. We just heard Amazon's coming to town. We are going to continue to see that. I know on Courthouse Road, it's been kind of the bedroom community. I actually applaud this developer for proposing additional development in the southern half of the county. There's not a lot left on Courthouse Road to build another house, I don't believe. And the reason I bring that up is we've lived through it, but now that we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, we can enjoy those improvements that have taken so long and so much work to put forward. So I thank the board, appreciate your time, and thank you. Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Andy Denton.
Hi, my name's Andy Denham. I'm at 232 Hollyberry Road, which is in Mr. Snelling's district. I highly encourage the board not to approve this development. By moving forward with this, you're obviously looking at increased traffic in the area, which these roads cannot handle even if you were to have road improvements. From Stafford Lake's entrance out to Route 17, there's no room to widen that road, especially along those curves from what I see. The schools, Hartwood Elementary might not be overcrowded now, as was stated, but at the beginning of the school year, I believe it was, because they removed the preschool from there, which is just one single classroom, and they relocated that to Gary Melcher's school. By putting more kids into a classroom does not mean that the school is still not overcrowded. Putting more kids overtasks our educators. As a former educator here in this district, I know that 100%. It's just disheartening to hear this development could come out that way. The increased traffic is going to put through Stafford Lakes. That right-hand turn onto Route 17 is not going to ease the burden of traffic on Route 17 or getting onto Route 17. If you come out there any weekday, weekend, especially during the summer periods, on a Friday afternoon to turn left onto Route 17, you're looking at sometimes 10, 15 minutes. The only way that traffic will be eased will be to put a stoplight in at that intersection to make that traffic move more freely. And I just encourage the board to deny this application for development. Thank you.
Okay, my next speaker is Jennifer Hofstra.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Jennifer Hofsty, and I live at 43 Hollyberry Road. I, again, do not agree with allowing this residential community to be built at this time. The schools are out at capacity as far as I'm concerned, because if you have to remove teaching opportunities from a school to make it not at capacity, there's a problem there with the schools, and we need to fix that first. Also, kids are going to age. What are the impacts going to be for the middle school and high school as these children age and go through the other schools? What is the future impact for that? Because children just don't stay in elementary school the rest of their time. It doesn't happen. They grow. The response time is insufficient, and I don't think the money is sufficient that they're going to provide at this time for the public service and public safety, because a fire truck, from what I've just found online earlier this evening, without any equipment, runs $100,000. A ladder truck runs $300,000. An ambulance fully equipped runs over $250,000. So how is $137,000 going to be sufficient to help with public safety at this point. So there was our concerns, especially when we're not at a sufficient capacity right now with 65% rate. Again, I agree with my neighbor, Andy, with the situation at the intersection of 17. There definitely needs to be a stoplight in order to allow more traffic onto Holly Corner. The roads and the bends are not very tight, and if there is large traffic, like trash trucks, or even mail trucks and everything like that, there is a backup, there is a slowdown, and it's not safe to pass or anything like that, and especially with the double lines. It is not safe for fire trucks to come through, and I definitely think it would be a huge impact to Stofford Lakes, because they do have problems with speeding on their main corridor through the village area to get to Walmart. So I think this will be a huge negative impact for my neighbors as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next speaker is Donald Lauer.
Hello, my name is Donald Lauer, and I live in the old Berea Woods Drive development, and I oppose this project. The Burton's Farm development will be just another addition to the problem of too many people and not enough infrastructure. In itself, two very good reasons to not approve it. But there is another, much more important reason never discussed. That reason is the phenomenon known as the sixth mass extinction. It is ongoing and created by too many humans. If you are unfamiliar with this tragedy, then you need to change your news source. Not only have we altered the climate, but are killing most of animal life. Humans truly are the invasive species of this planet, which includes Stafford County. There is a 1,000 increase in extinction rate from historic levels. Very soon, elephants and giraffes will disappear, along with 1/2 of the coral in the oceans. Lest we forget about the many smaller creatures we live amongst. Please tell me someone cares about this. I leave you to ponder the following quote by environmentalist William Beebe. The beauty and genius of a work of art may be reconceived, though at first material expression be destroyed. A vanished harmony may yet again inspire the composer. But when the last individual of a race of living creatures breathes no more, another heaven and another earth must pass before such a one can be again. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are all the speaker cards that I have. If you would like to address the board, please come down to the podium.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the board. My name is Andy Fisher. I'm a Stafford County resident, and I live at 305 Monroe Avenue. I'm here to speak in support of this project. My explanation is simple. The board has made it a priority to expand development within the urban service area in order to reduce development in the agricultural districts. This project does just that. So that's all I had to say. You know, if you want to keep the development out of the agriculture areas and in the areas that you have set forth to develop, this will do that. And again, I support the project. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the board on this public hearing?
Hello, I'm Joe Brito, 544 West Rocky Run Road. When the reservoir was built a few years ago, Rocky Run Road was closed. So now there's about 300 houses that are stuck going in and out only with one road, and that's Holly Corner Road. So the 300 of us have to go by Burton's Farm every day, in and out. That's the only way we have to go in and out. And the supervisors has caused that situation for us. So you're liable if there's issues. Many accidents have occurred on our road over the last 3 years. I'd say about a dozen times either accidents happened or our road was closed down from different circumstances. The developers not proffering to put a left turn lane into the development. So when we're coming home and we're going to be stopping behind people that are turning left into that subdivision. So that's not really fair to us. He should have a proffer for a left turn lane, and that's just being cheap. Years ago we had higher standards and proffer guidelines. The proffer guidelines were over $40,000 per house to mitigate the impacts. And many developers have already proffered nearly $40,000, and their proffers actually had an increase clause in it that increased with inflation. Now this developer has no increase clause, so if the project sits for years and then gets developed, there's no increase. Let's see, this developer has only proffered $15,000. But other developers have proffered nearly $40,000. Now that's not fair to the other developers, and it's not fair to the citizens that have to subsidize this development. And I estimate that the subsidy is going to be about $5 million in debt just for schools alone for this project. The next high school is going to cost $60,000, over $60,000 per seat, and it's probably going to be $70,000 per seat. But this developer is only offering $14,000 for schools. Now, who takes the burden of that? That's the taxpayers. You need to think about the taxpayers before you approve anything like this. And that's just cheap, and the developer is trying to get away with it. You can't let them get away with cutting the taxpayers short. Our standards should be much higher than what this developer is proposing. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the board? Please come forward.
Good evening. My name is Brad Baker, and I live at 17 Dahlia Lane. I worked in Stafford County for a little over a decade now, and actually, as of 6 months ago, I'm fortunate enough to call Stafford County my home now. So I'd like to come here. I'm speaking in favor of this particular amendment here this evening. I have 2 school-age children, so just being transparent, any money going towards the schools, I'm definitely here to speak in favor of. The proffers that he's offering, along with the additional revenue coming in from the additional homes, I'm in favor of, and I hope you would vote so. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the board?
Hi, my name is Casey McLeod, and I live at 40 Sonoma Lane, which is about a third of a mile from the proposed development. I am for growth. I am a local architect. Like, this is my business, but this particular job is not appropriate. You guys all know the purpose of an amendment to a zoning map. You have to meet certain guidelines: public necessity, convenience, general welfare, and good zoning practice. Unfortunately, this development doesn't meet any of that. The public necessity, there is no public necessity for this job. We have approximately 11,737 active residential development units in Stafford County right now, and that's according to the zoning website. Convenience, you might say, well, it's convenient because it's on the south side of 17 and we need it there. 2,480 of those active residential units are within a 4-mile radius. And general welfare, you know, they've mentioned that the traffic analysis study said that there's going to be 1,336 vehicle trips per day generated by this development. Now, most of them are going to take Holly Corner. It's just standard. Most of Stafford Lakes that live next to Holly Corner take Holly Corner. The problem is that that intersection now will see almost 1,400 cars coming in and out, and it'll provide an area for an accident. Now, there's an accident there. Guess what? None of the fire trucks or ambulances are getting to any of the other 300 homes beyond that point. So while they're providing 2 access points to their neighborhood, you have an accident there, I'm not getting the ambulance that I need. So it's not in favor of general welfare. And then good zoning practice. There is not 1 inch of the perimeter of this property that is an R2 development. It is all R1 and A1. An R2 reclassification of the property is almost spot zoning. I mean, there's not an inch of it. So I know it's under the urban services area in the comprehensive plan, but it's not appropriate for that spot. A couple other items to note is, you know, we talk about, well, he's providing money to improve the road in some areas. It doesn't fix it. That Holly Corner is a bad road. Just because we're putting a little Band-Aid over here, it doesn't fix it. Really, we need to be fixing it in, like you had said, it gets a B. I don't understand that, how it gets a B in the road study. So anyway, it's a problem. The development's not going to fix it. It needs to be fixed by VDOT, you know. And I think that's it. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to address the board?
Good evening. My name's Antonio McLeod. I am married to Kason McLeod. I am the other architect, so I am definitely for growth. I think the more construction we do, the better. But I agree with the individuals who live near this development, who are against it. The people who are for it, they don't go down Holly Corner every day. It's when you drive down Holly Corner, you literally hold your breath when a car goes by. It's 18 feet wide in some areas. So when there's a truck going by, you're terrified. One of the gentlemen said that we can't stop this development. That's why we're here, right? I mean, we're here to talk about future development. We can develop smartly, like my wife mentioned earlier. We don't have to just do development because that's what we're doing. And like my kids are here, you can see, we studied before we came. C's, D's, F's, they're not allowed. And if we were going to allow Xboxes and PlayStations with C's and D's, like, you don't get to have your cake and eat it too. So if this was your property or your child, would you be okay with C's and D's? So I vote against it, and I hope you guys vote against it as well.
Thank you very much. Anybody else like to address the board?
I'm Robin Woodard, and I live at 40 Sonoma Lane also, and I'm not an architect. But I do drive the kids down Holly Corner Road every day, and so I would wonder, I'm not sure if any of you live off of Holly Corner Road, and I wonder how many cars each of you have in your driveway. And so from going from 3 acres per unit to 3 units per acre, that's a lot of cars, that's a lot of traffic. And as Tony says, we really do hold our breath when we go down Holly Corner Road. It's so narrow, there's no shoulder. And I'm always worried that if a car's too wide and they don't pay attention to their lane, somebody's going over. And so I really think that the best order of business would be fix the road and then develop. We're okay with the development, but please make the roads better before you put the cars on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Christina Drugitz, and I live at 383 Holly Corner Road. I am not in favor of this. I have a son who is here with me tonight who goes to Hartwood Elementary School. I believe they are completely over capacity. If you ever go to an event at Hartwood, there's nowhere to park. You have to park across the street at the is it the Presbyterian Church?
Presbyterian, yes.
You have to park across the street and walk to the school. Also, just as my neighbors have said, driving down Holly Corner is white knuckle all the time, okay? I only live, I would say, about a quarter of a mile from this development, and the traffic is terrible. I can sit on my front porch at night and just watch cars all hours of the night coming in and out of the road. I encourage you guys to vote against this. Or I also encourage you to come travel down Holly Corner Road and see what we're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the board?
Greg Woodard, 40 Sonoma Lane. I'd like you probably to quiz the bus drivers that go down through there. You have your, Stofford school system, and you're able to contact a super that, can get hold of bus drivers and ask them, would they like to see another, 240 cars in the morning going by them, people going to work and stuff. They might be able to tell you, what it's like and enlighten you. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the board? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. Would the applicant like to address anything that's been brought up?
Yes, just a couple of quick notes. Obviously, I mentioned earlier about the traffic, and we kind of know that in terms of the width of the roads are not great, no question. But there are also not the worst roads in Stafford County. There's a lot of worse roads and have a lot of developments. Again, back to the 17 intersection, that will help and improve a lot. It is not going to help the left turn lane going towards north, but it's going to help tremendously everybody going to the other side. And we looked at we talked to Vita about a traffic signal, just kind of curious. And of course, Holly Corner Road does not have enough capacity. You usually have to have close to 16,000 cars a day, I think, to justify having a signal. So it's a long way from there. It'll probably never happen, at least in this time. One thing I was saying about, yes, funds and money is always an issue and is always a concern. The Burton Farm today, if I'm correct, pays taxes probably about $3,000 a year in the farm. Obviously, having residential, it's going to be close to $400,000 a year. So that's quite a bit of money that helps offset. Is it going to solve everything? No, it's not. But at least it does help. Money, unfortunately, takes money to fix things. There's also transportation impact fees, which the county puts in this project is going to generate close to $360,000 of transportation impact fees. That money, as far as I understand, is basically to help alleviate some of the problems with transportation throughout the county. So hopefully, these at least it brings funds to be able to help solve some of the issues. I know someone mentioned about there's 11,000 units that are approved in the county, and yes, we know there's a lot of lots that are, quote, approved. A lot of them you cannot build on. A lot of them have no drain fields. A lot of them are in areas that there's no water. There's a lot of things. So if you look back to the lots you can physically build on, they're a lot more limited. Trust me, if there's a lot of lots out there that, why go through this process, and the costs and everything else for 2 years, for 120 lots. It's not like I'm developing Stafford Lakes that's, 1,000 or 1,100 lots. So if the lots were available, then, people would be using those lots and building on them a lot easier than going through this process. There's some gentleman mentioned about the bus drivers, and I think the county itself, because that came up in the Planning Commission, and I think the county itself, Mr. Mike Zorath, called and talked to the school and transportation, and they basically indicated that, it's no worse than, again, any other county road, and they drive down and up them all the time, and they don't have any issues. And I guess we can talk to Mr. Zorath to verify that, but he did call them and talk to them about that issue. Let's see if there's anything else. Again, someone mentioned about public safety. I don't disagree. Yes, fire trucks do cost a lot of money. There's, you know, ambulances, but again, development does help, you know, in terms of taxes, in terms of people that are working, income, it does help offset these things. Yes, it does have the cost of it in schools, but it does help. South Stafford, I've lived in South Stafford for 30 years. My kids went to Hartwood Elementary School, and we used to park across the street, you know, almost 20 years ago. So that has not changed. It's just the way things are. The parking lot's very small in Hartwood, and that's just, you know, we've done that. We've managed. I know everybody that's talked against this project, when 17's backed up or some of the other main roads, they go on the back roads. They basically become also create problems for other smaller roads. But that's just unfortunately what we have and what we deal with. So again, I hope you guys will consider the project. There's a lot of good things about it. Is it perfect? Probably not, but there's no perfect project, I think, in the county these days. And if there's any other questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Any questions for Mr. Shallerby? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Oh, you have a question for Mr. Harvey. Okay.
This, and one of the lady who spoke brought this up, I was going to talk to this, is the properties that are around this are zoned, the ones that have development on them are zoned A1. Is that correct? There's no R2 zoning in this area?
Mr. Dudenheffer, that is correct. There is no R2 zoning in this area. Stafford Lakes is zoned R1 with the proffered conditions. The lot sizes and type of dwellings proposed with this project would be similar to Stafford Lakes.
Why didn't they request a zoning change to R1? Are they getting bigger lot yields because of it? What's the reason for that?
Mr. Dudenheffer, I can have Mr. Shalaby elaborate, but the resident R1 zone has a maximum density of 1.5 dwelling units per acre compared to the 2.55 which are currently proffered at. The R1 zone allows an increase to 2.25 dwelling units an acre with a CUP issued by the board and a cluster development approval. So again, I'll have to rely on Mr. Shalby to discuss the number of dwelling units with the project and why they chose the R2 versus what.
But I mean, they're still getting a higher lot yield because they went to R2 instead of R1. I mean, is that a correct statement?
Correct.
Okay. And the that bothers me, to be honest with you. Mr. Shalaby said that the proffers that are there alleviate some of the problems. And everyone knows that road safety is very, very important to me, and I don't think under any circumstances we should be in the business of making any road less safe. And the rationale is that, well, it's not as worse as some, because this definitely makes, I think, this road less safe. I've been on that road, and it's not fun to drive on unless you're in a little sports car or something. So it's not our job to make the roads less safe. The last comment I'll make is to the former supervisor who spoke respectfully. I would ask him that he needs to go review the proffer bill that was passed in 2016, which makes what we can ask for or even discuss in proffers dramatically different and less than what we even could when he served on the board. And it's regrettable that that happened like that, but it's even in a worse condition than when he served. So might want to look at that if he gets a chance. So I can't support this for reasons that I've stated and many others. So thank you.
Okay. Ms. Maurer? No, I'm just wondering if there's a all right. I'll bring it back to the board. This is in the Hartwood District. So I will yield to Mr. Snellings on this.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First of all, let me thank everyone here that spoke tonight. I think most of you live in the Hartwood District. I appreciate you being here. And believe me, as Mr. Dudenheffer's just said, you raised some very interesting points tonight. I, too, have some concerns about transportation and safety. I've traveled Holly Corner Road several times a month. I'm up and down that road. I know what it is. It's sort of like it was engineered by a snake with a broken back. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's not the only road that's that way in Stafford County. There are a lot of them. The school proffers is unfortunate. As Mr. Dudenheffer said, the laws did change. The state has put several restrictions on us. We can no longer require proffers. And it looks like because of the new capacity numbers that we were provided just today from the school board, who changed those capacity numbers at Hartwood, that the proffers for this project, school proffers, will more than likely go away. I too have a concern that, as Mr. Dudenheffer stated, that the adjoining properties, A1, R1, no R2, so that's a concern. With all of that said, I think we've got a little more work to do on this, and I would motion to defer this to our first meeting in February. That will give time for staff to get back on the school proffers, get that worked out, and maybe take a deeper dive into the transportation issues and bring it back to the board at that time. Thank you.
Okay, I have a motion and a second for a deferring this. Okay, any discussion? All right, please cast your vote for a deferral. Tally the vote. Motion passes unanimously to defer this item. Thank you for everyone for coming out. Mr. Snellings, if you could please read us into closed session again.
The economic development ones, the last three.
Okay, whereas the board, a resolution to authorize closed meeting, whereas the board desires to hold a closed meeting in discussion and consideration of the acquisition of real property for public purpose, where discussion in an opening meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategies of the board. And 3, discussion concerning a prospective business where no previous announcement has been made of the business interest in locating its facilities in the county. And whereas pursuant to Virginia Code 2.2-3711, A3, A5, A7, such discussions may occur in closed meeting. So moved.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to go into closed session. Any discussion? Please cast your vote. Tally the vote. The board is now in closed session. Thank you.
You said that would be the first.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please cast your vote. Tally the vote to certify closed session. Motion passes unanimously. This is the end of the December 11th Board of Supervisors meeting.